So, welcome everyone. Hello, I'm Roy Shamir. I'm an engineer and I'm the co-chair of the Audio Engineering Society New York section. Welcome to another great event presented by the New York section. On behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank our hosts here at VoxPod New York City and also Buttons New York. They're located here on 39th Street. Great facility. Come check them out. Check out their websites. I also want to give a big shout out to the company that supports us with great raffles in the Split EQ and the Anthology Bundle. And that's Eventide Audio. Thank you very much, Eventide, for all your help. And before we get started, I want to tell you about our next event, which is on May 20th at Eastside Sound. We're going to do a deep dive into the workflow there. They recently updated the studio and received a Harrison console, so we'll be incorporating a workflow that incorporates a 16-track 2-inch tape running on ReproHead via Dante right into their DAW, which happens to be Pro Tools, and of course running through their new Harrison console. So come network with us. We'll do another raffle. It's another great facility. And join us in person. For those of you on Facebook that are hesitant, come and join us there in person. It'll be another great event then on May 20th. And also, if anyone's interested in joining our committee, our monthly meeting, please drop us an email at aesnewyorksection@gmail.com, and we will send you a Zoom link for the next time we meet. So without further ado, let's get started. Please welcome our illustrious panel, Joel Spector, Bob Palladino, and Josiah Gluck. And
it's Saturday Night Live! Come back here with Mark Jones!
Okay, Lauren, we didn't mean to steal it. So here we are. And now, because of my great speaking voice,
it's an honor to introduce someone whose name is synonymous with excellence in broadcast audio engineering, Joel Spector. Joel holds a BA in Communication Arts and Sciences from Queens College, City University of New York, earned in 1967. But even before graduating, Joel had already begun a remarkable career in television, joining NBC in 1965 as a staff audio control engineer. Over his extraordinary 36-year tenure at NBC, Joel lent his audio expertise to some of the most iconic programs in television history, including an astounding 33 years on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, 16 seasons on Saturday Night Live, and many memorable years working on Christmas at Rockefeller Center, the Miss America Pageant, and Late Night with David Letterman. His work has not gone unnoticed. Joel received 2 Emmy nominations even after officially retiring in 2001. Joel remained deeply involved in the field, continuing with NBC on high-profile projects such as Nightly News, the Olympics, and political conventions. He also maintained a 30-year association with the Tony Awards, serving as a music playback engineer, while freelancing on various other productions. Joel is also a U.S. Navy veteran, having served aboard the USS John F. Kennedy during its commissioning, where he helped redesign and operate the ship's television and radio broadcast systems. Joel is a life member of the Audio Engineering Society, where he once chaired the New York section, a life member of SMPTE, a former member of NATAS, and was an associate member of NARAS. In short, Joel Spector's career is a masterclass in dedication, innovation, and quiet excellence behind the scenes of the shows that shaped our culture. Please join AES New York section in welcoming Joel Spector.
So, forgive me for using a computer. It's much more eloquent than I am.
It's also a true honor to introduce a legend in the world of live music, broadcasting and sound engineering, Josiah Gluck. Currently in his remarkable 32nd season with Saturday Night Live, and his 29th as co-music engineer, Josiah has been instrumental in shaping the sound of one of television's most iconic shows. His work has earned him industry-wide recognition, including an Emmy Award for Outstanding Sound Mixing for the SNL 40th Anniversary Special, and Emmy nominations for the past 2 seasons of SNL. If you've watched SNL in the past 3 decades, chances are you've heard Josiah's masterful work, whether it was mixing performances by artists like Ray, Chris Stapleton, Prince, Brandi Carlile, the 1975 Coldplay, Adele, Foo Fighters, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, Sir Paul McCartney, or Ed Sheeran, just to name a few. Josiah's legacy goes beyond Studio 8H. From mixing music on Night Music with David Sanborn in the late 80s, to shaping the sound of shows like The Rosie O'Donnell Show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and NBC's Christmas in Rockefeller Center, he's been a defining presence in live television audio. Beyond broadcast, Josiah is also a three-time Grammy nominee, respected producer, and recording engineer, with roots that trace back to his role as chief engineer and technical director at GRP Records starting in 1982. Please join AES New York section in welcoming an industry pioneer whose ears have helped define the sound of a generation, Josiah Gluck.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least,
The honor continues to introduce someone whose career has quite literally helped shape the sound of television over the past 4 decades. Bob Palladino has been an audio engineer at NBC since 1980, bringing his expertise and steady hand to some of the most iconic broadcasts in television history. From The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder to NBC Nightly News and Christmas at Rockefeller Center, Bob has been the trusted A1 behind the scenes. He's mixed the magic of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, dialed in the energy of Football Night in America, and contributed to the global spectacle of the Olympics. In 1985, Bob stepped into the world of Saturday Night Live as the music mixer, and just a year later, he took on the role of production mixer, a role he's held ever since. If you've ever watched a great performance or sketch on SNL and thought, wow, that sounded amazing, you've got Bob to thank. Known as The Funnel, his desk is the last stop before broadcast. Over the years, he's also lent his talents to countless other NBC productions, always ready to step in and deliver. Please join AES New York section in welcoming a true audio legend, Bob Palladino.
that's right, Bob the Funnel Palladino is here. Thanks for being here, guys. We really appreciate it. And let's dig in a little bit. So, let's start with Joel. How did you first start out in audio?
When I was 10 years old, I was given a Webcore tape recorder with a ceramic mic and one magic eye indicator. And I figured out what to do with that for a couple of years. I did my first playback in Sunday school. I was 12 years old. They did Eternal Light radio scripts. They did on stage, and I volunteered to do something they hadn't done before, which is to have the music and sound effects. I somehow packaged all that stuff and did it. I don't remember doing it, but I know I did it. A couple of years later, something more advanced for high school with original sound effects, I still have. And then on to Queens College and studying music appreciation, broadcast production, and theater. A lot of sound for theater shows, some quite extensive. And that overlapped with then getting my first job at NBC, which was in the radio recording department in 1965, quarter-inch tape, cartridges, making discs, editing interviews and music for shows at Playback Live, and then a spell in the Navy on its aircraft carrier, as the automated voice mentioned, with 100 TVs all around this aircraft carrier and 4 channels of radio and live television training and entertainment. That was a year and a half. Back to NBC radio, and in '74 I transitioned over to NBC Television and started working on all the shows. And a lot of it was an ability to figure out what to do, having been visiting a lot of television studios and recording studios over the years. But I never really sat with anybody that said, this is how you do this. They would say, this is what this show needs, or here's the map for this show. And within a year, I was asked to work on the show that was brand new, which was Saturday Night Live. And I've been there forever. 1975.
Okay, same question for you, Josiah. How did you get into audio?
I've always been a bit of a technology nerd. I used to love tape recorders, TVs, record players, movie projectors, all that sort of stuff. And played around with some little tape recorders that we had at home, did some stuff with theater sound in high school, but really started in college working at the radio station. As I like to tell people, I spent an inordinate amount of time at the radio station, and my GPA will readily attest to that. And in between my junior and senior years, I got a job as an apprentice at Right Track Studios here, when they were down on 24th Street. When I'd been working in radio, I always thought, well, gee, I think I might want to do stuff in radio. But then I would notice, well, all of these records that I really like have these artists in common, or these players in common, these engineers, these studios, these producers in common. And I was like, I think I'd like to maybe do the stuff that gets the stuff on the records. So I worked at Right Track for a summer of 1980, went back to college and finished that up in 1981. I'll give you all a moment to do the math. And then I went to Right Track and they said, oh, yeah, we know we called you to come back, but we don't have anything. Try this place, Secret Sound, up the block. I went to Secret Sound. They hired me on the spot as an assistant. And I was there for about 16 months before I was stolen away by GRP Records, Dave Grusin and Larry Rosen, who would come into work on a project. And about 10 days after I met them, Larry called me up and said, hey, you want a job? It's for one person. It's full-time. You got eyes for it. And I said, yes. I went in there the next day with a resume and so forth, and you didn't want to listen to anything, you didn't want to see anything, you just said, you seem like a nice guy, you know your way around the control room, and I think we should give this a shot. And that's why I'm sitting here, because of that one thing. And I will have this quick sidebar, is that Joel and I met back at Secret Sound because he was the person from NBC who would hang out when one of our steady clients, the SNL house band, so yes, I've known some of these guys for a very long time, would come in and do their pre-records and rehearsals, and Joel would sit there, you know, making sure that everything was kosher for Passover, that we could send these things up to NBC. And one thing we did, I told these guys earlier, is when we used to send these little reels up to NBC, this is 1981, 1981, 82 season, we would print tones at the head of the reel, like you do, 1K, 10K, 100. We would print 10K from the console. We would take the output down like 1 or 2 dB, so that when it was put up at NBC and the engineer, we were banking on someone going, oh, well, wait a second. I need to bring my high end, I have to bring 10K up. The tape was flat, we just printed it lower so that it would then be transferred to cart a little bit brighter when it hit the air. And now you may take me in, you know. So anyway, but that's how I got into this. And then from GRP, a few people had recommended me to a gentleman who unfortunately is no longer with us, Stacey Foster. He was like, I believe Jim Flynn and Dave Hewitt had told, oh, you got to get this guy Josiah for this show with David Sanborn because it's jazz and it's music, blah, blah, blah. I was hired for the show. I had absolutely no business being hired. I had one live record under my belt. I had no live experience, no TV experience. I survived half the first season. And then I decided, well, I'm going out on my own. Kept in touch with people from SNL. And in 92, I was asked to come into SNL and do tape playback for music underscoring and voiceovers and things like that. Did that for 3 seasons. And then I got to move into the music room with Jay Vicari, who's the senior music mixer on the show. And it was a blessing and an education and a privilege to sit next to this guy so I can do what I do now. I had a decade of making records under my belt before I got to SNL, but it was a completely different world. It was so different in so many ways, and now it feels like second nature, but it was terrifying.
Great. So, Bob, same question. Josiah is a little guilty of answering the next question already, but just if we could focus on how you got into audio.
Well, I also had one of those Webcore tape machines with a Magic Eye when I was a kid. Did a lot of recording and playback. I'm a musician, so eventually when the band I was in broke up, I got a 4-track machine and did all kinds of experiments with music and guitar playing, vocals and stuff, and that landed me a job at a recording studio in Long Island. So I worked there for probably 2 years, and one of our clients was a director at WNBC in New York. So I contacted him, and he said, well, I can't get you a job, but I know who you should talk to. And I wrote him a letter and so forth, and I got hired as a VR, vacation relief, with the understanding that you stay 3 months and then you're out. Well, I ended up staying 40 some odd years, so I was very fortunate. I started out, as most people do, as an assistant in A2, assisting in the control rooms. And then eventually I got to mix the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder. And back then there was no house band, but he had a lot of music on that show. So every day there was a different band, complete strike, complete setup. We did that for days on end. A lot of course I can't remember a lot of bands that we used to do, but George Benson, The Tubes, The Association, Santana, groups that were popular at the time, in the 80s. Went into news for 3 years, which was a good time to be in news because when they did conventions and elections and so forth, they took the crews with them, which is not the case now. So I got to travel all over to where they were going to do nightly news. And then along came Saturday Night Live. And when SNL came back in 1985, Lorne came back. He brought with him Stacy, as Josiah mentioned. And there was a decision made to have a separate music mix room, which hadn't been done up till then. And there was also a decision made to record the track and record the show in 24-track multi, which also hadn't been done. It was very prescient because aftermarkets and stuff really didn't exist back then, but they made a lot of use of those tapes over the years. So I was in the music room. I did that job for a year, and then I moved into the production. And I've been there ever since. And I want to acknowledge that even though I'm sitting behind the console, there are booth A2s that have been very valuable over the years, starting with Joel, who was with me for 5 years. I have had numerous people over the years. I've got a guy named Ezra Matichek who works with me now. Very valuable person for right-hand stuff, putting out fires and so forth. And that's why I'm here.
Great. So that moves us to the next question, which is how and where did you all meet each other? So Josiah's already given us a little insight.
I spilled the beans.
So Bob, why don't you tell us how you first met Joel and Josiah?
Well, Joel was on staff at NBC at the time when I started there as a VR. And eventually we worked together. I believe it might have been the Tomorrow Show.
VR is?
Vacation relief.
Okay.
So I think we worked together probably on the Tomorrow Show first. I was cutting a reel of tape. I used to do the bumper reel for the Tomorrow Show. That's where I started there. So I think that's how we met. And then eventually we started to do audio together. Josiah, I met you before you started working at SNL when you were still with GRP. Because you used to come around a lot and talk to the guys and Stacy and so forth.
Well, I think that was because of the night music connection.
Okay, night music.
So that was the end of my GRP time. It was the fall of '88, and by the downbeat of '89, I had left GRP. So and then I hung out a little bit from time to time. I'd come up and
probably
see
where
people.
I met you.
Yeah, it was during that time. Yeah. 89, 90, yeah.
So obviously you guys came later. Joel was there already, and you both were working with him when you arrived. Okay. And you different jobs and positions over the years. I think that's something that people may or may not realize how it works in the broadcast, just sort of like it works in the studio side of things, just not as many job descriptions. Okay, so what's it like to work on this show? Is there any stress?
No, they have to wake us up. It's so peaceful.
The biggest source of stress on this show has to do with the comedy, because the comedy material is rewritten every time it goes in front of the camera. It's been that way since the beginning. And that's the way Lorne wants to keep it loose. He's always trying to refine things. He's giving notes right through dress rehearsal. He gives notes on the air. I don't know if anybody ever sees those, but they're taking notes from him on the air. And he wants it fresh. The problem is the cast doesn't really get a feel for what they're saying. So some sketches play, they sparkle, they're wonderful, they're fine, even the live ones. Sometimes they're a little odd, and the character is saying, I love you to somebody over there, but they're looking over there because that's where the cue cards are, and I thought we cut that line, they say to themselves, or I'm supposed to be upstage now, or. So that's the biggest source of stress is not just that the show changes, the schedule of the show very quickly hasn't really changed ever. The guest host comes in on Monday. He or she works with the writers. The writers stay up all night Tuesday after a big pasta dinner somewhere, and they write 30 sketches. All those sketches get table read with 50 people sitting around a table or virtually around a table, depending on where we are.
On Wednesday?
That's on Wednesday. Lauren makes a decision. He has to pick a number of sketches that are actually going to go before the cameras because they have to contact the scenery people to provide the scenery for these sketches. And so a rough running order is crafted for rehearsal. And Thursday and Friday, rehearse the music and block out all the comedy. Saturday is supposed to be a run-through, dress, and air. The run-through, a lot of times, ends up being reblocking because everything's changed again. So there's a lot going on, and it's pretty much nonstop. You know, scenery is being brought in and assembled and hammered together while people are rehearsing.
I just want to interject here. You mentioned the table read.
Yeah.
That's where I come on board as the audio mixer, and I follow along all the scripts, and I make little notes along the way, like this is likely going to be a boom sketch, or this is going to require lofts. And it's just rough notes that I make that will be refined as the blocking commences and the rehearsals begin. So I go to my team, a rather large and illustrious team, and tell them what I think we're going to need for that day's rehearsal. And we just take it from there as far as what we need for that particular sketch. And it's always changing. A writer may come on and say, well, can he come out with a handheld instead? And I want it to be practical. Okay, so we go back and take a minute to fix that. Or the opposite could be, I don't want to wear a hand mic, I want to wear a lav. Okay, so we'll adjust and adapt as needed as we go. So by the time we hit air, the changes still happen, but thankfully they're much fewer.
I would also like to add quickly, because where we overlap with that is on Wednesday night, I'll get a list from, I sit up waiting for that to come in from Leanne Pendarvis. Much like, as they say in Gone with the Wind, when everyone's waiting for the list of casualties from Gettysburg. So I find out what sketches are going to have live music or not. And usually you'll see like needle drop, needle drop, needle drop, needle drop. Under it's like, yes. Or you will have Jack Black's monologue, which was a huge thing going through the studio and everything. And one of the first things with our discussion was, well, we, that is the music room, took Jack's mic. Sometimes if it's a music monologue, and there's a lot of dialogue and then singing and then dialogue and all of that, Bob will usually take that. Once we had a thing where Jack took the mic and it went all singing from there on out, we just took that and it was a whole package from the music room. Music we block on Thursday morning because, as Joel was saying, we're getting sets made and so forth. Well, music stage is a standing set. So that we know those dimensions, we know what that's going to be. Of course, more and more recently, we've had a lot of people over the past several seasons now, they will bring in a whole set, or they'll bring in floor, ceiling, and three-sided video wall. So you have just this lovely hard surface box with everyone playing. And oh, you know what'll be really good? We'll put the drums in a corner. So it'll be like, it'll just ricochet all over. So, yeah.
There's been a few special effects in recent times. I can think of Billie Eilish, where the room was kind of spinning.
Yes.
And so that made
so we have to
the difference than usual. But
play nice with that. And sometimes the sonic considerations take such a back seat and might be in the caboose of a train. It's so not in anyone's mind. It's all about what does it look like? What are the lighting doing and so forth?
And like the bastard son that audio is to video, you then deal with what you've been given. A good example in my mind is the Ukrainian orchestra choir that performed.
Oh, yeah.
And Josiah slickly put two Sheps in stereo way down on the floor on the one side where you couldn't see the mics. And at home, you're like, oh, this sounds incredible. But you probably don't think for a second, like, where are the mics?
What happened was, and I also dealt with, somehow, Jay and I share the duties, and he'll be off doing another gig or something, and I'll move over. Otherwise, I'm his second in command. But I was mixing that night, and it was the day after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we had this choir come out. And it's like, well, I got to do something here. And I was working with my colleague Lawrence Manchester, who mixes music down at the Tonight Show, and they have some lovely little Sheps mics. I don't know if you have that photo that you...
Oh, did you send it to me?
Yeah, I emailed
I'll
you
dig
the
it
photo.
out while we're
Okay.
working.
And I hooked up this little thing looking up at the choir, and then we had two Sennheiser, I guess they were MKH-40s, as outriggers, and I had very, very little time to do this. And our main camera guy, John Pinto, was there, and I said, can you see the mic? I had my guys moving the mic. Can you see the mics?
There
Can
it
you
is.
see the mics? All right, so the choir is standing here. You can see the feet of people in the audience. And I took this photo like a few minutes before dress rehearsal. You can see the spike marks so we know where to put it back. And there were those two mics, and then there were the outriggers. Can you see them? No. Can you see them? Yes, we can see them. Okay, bring them out. And I listened to a rehearsal at around 6:30, and then we did dress rehearsal, and then we were on the air. And the trickiest thing about any of this, and I had to live through this with Kate McKinnon singing Hallelujah that election night, and when this children's choir sang Silent Night after the shooting, this school shooting in Connecticut. Shady Hook it was. Sandy Hook, sorry, thank you, Sandy Hook. And what happened was, everyone says, live from New York, it's Saturday night. And then the band starts to play. Well, I got mics open. When those kids sang that thing, and when this choir sang, they're right in front of the band. So I have to fire a snapshot so the entire world changes while they're saying that. And then what I have to do is, and I snap ISO those faders or that VCA so they will not dump out. When I had those kids, they were the ones who said live from New York, it's Saturday night. We brought the reverb down a bit so it didn't sound like they were in Grand Central. And I go live from New York, hit the snapshot. Those faders stay open so I don't get live from New York. That would have been non-good. And I rehearsed it a few times, and then we did it on dress, did it on air, live from New York, and then I brought that VCA down, and I actually had that on the flip layer of Lenny Pickett's microphone, which was already open at that point, so I knew I would have it. And which all goes around to say, and I'm sure you can attest to this, and you can attest to this, you don't watch the show, you work on the show. If you watch it, you're like, oh shit.
That's what happens.
That's where stress comes in. You mentioned about stress.
Yeah.
It's the moments like that where you have to really act quickly. We'll probably get into this a little bit later, but we had a mishap with the Harrison console I was using at the time.
Right.
We had to improvise an entire music room, basically, but we still managed to put Paul Simon and the house band on the air and still run a 24-track multi. So I don't know how we did it, but that was quite something. But the thing is if something goes wrong, you hope it doesn't. You hope nothing will ever happen. But you lose a microphone, or someone hits their love, or it goes out with something.
Right.
Now you've got to say, oh, where do I go? What do I do? And sometimes there isn't any place to go.
Yeah.
Just ride
Usually
with the problem.
there's somebody around, there's the people ready, they're all paying attention. If you watch the show, you will mess up. It happened to me on the news. Oh, what a great story this is. And I'm sitting there, it's over, and then someone says, Chuck's mic. You
can't watch the show.
And that takes us to what the environment is, which goes partly to stress. As the audio engineer, and for 40 years, there was one audio engineer on all these shows, right up until Bob came in to do the production mix, and it was a music room. One person did all this stuff. On the first Saturday Night Live, I counted this morning, there were 70 sound sources. We don't have room for that. Scott Chapter made it work. But you're doing the show, you're listening to the tone of the show, you're listening to the director and the AD associate director who are giving you cues, and the stage manager warning you about certain things going to happen. Occasionally your crew will talk to you very, very concisely, we hope, and to say, this is good, this is bad, I need to tell you something. And you're on the air. You know, you're driving the car. You have to look in this mirror, that mirror, and get where you're going. So if something goes wrong, it's very difficult. It's only human to freeze for a moment, but you've got to count on your people also paying attention.
Yeah.
And they will say, oh, I can do this. Or
Right.
you'll get a quick message, go to 14.
Right.
You know.
Or we have someone out there with a fishpole.
So I imagine right up to the downbeat, there's that stress level of changing and so on. So you can't do your yoga or your deep breathing. You do that in the morning before you come in.
Something like that. But I mean, also, and they're calling audibles during the last 20 minutes of the
That's
show.
right.
Things are always changing.
It's probably less stress once the show starts as opposed to right up to the
Well, the
minute.
thing for music, I find, is by the time we've done Thursday, and we also record everything into Pro Tools now, and I can play it back and do infinite sound checks. Everything is just completely flat to tape. I'll do that forever, I'll say.
Yeah.
So then I can adjust all sorts of EQs, practice moves. If I have a guest engineer or someone from the band who says, I'd like this throw on this word here, and I'll set it up, and I'm like, you know what? You're out with this band 700 nights a year. I'm not. I haven't heard this. It's your...
Here's your throw.
Here's your throw. Don't screw up. It's live TV. Or words to that effect. But by the time I'm on the air with it, have messed with it on Thursday a bit, Friday, if it's a slow day, I want to refine a few things. Saturday, we have an hour sound check with just the band, not even cameras, before we even get to dress rehearsal. So it's pretty well under your fingers by the time you get on air. And therefore, it's a pretty good muscle memory, and you get it, and then, as I say, you take your brain out, you rub it on the Earth's core to demag it, and put it back in and get ready to do the next show.
Yeah, production isn't exactly like that.
Yeah.
Where you can go back and rehearse things and tweak things and whatever. It's usually pretty much,
It is.
it's like a nonstop.
Yeah.
This was the reason to have a music room, because the time that the band now gets to refine what they're doing, it didn't exist.
Right.
We didn't even record the rehearsals. They would perform it, and then, how was that? You know, and then one of the representatives would be with me or Scotty in the only mixing position there was. This is pretty good, pretty good. We had insurance during the first season. We acquired someone you see a picture of. We acquired the services of the legendary Bob Lifton, a studio owner and award-winning recording engineer, a lot of hits in the 50s and 60s, and a pioneer in live audio and live television sound. He and Ed Green were the ones who figured out how to do all that and then get into post-production. But he would be someone we sorely needed, who would be the liaison between the performers, their representatives, our director, the design department, and the audio department. He would speak the right language to each group and come together with not just the floor plan and a suggested plugging sheet, but what was important. We'd know what was important to them. And otherwise he'd be flying blind. And he was with us until he passed away in 1988. So it was a blessing to have this guy there. And nothing was a problem. He would always say, here's what we're going to do.
I got you guys already working in that methodology, and
Oh, yeah.
when he unfortunately left, you already had some of the benefits of what he had designed with you
That's
guys
right.
and how you
That's right.
execute things.
I would say that the problems or the challenges can be very unique to the show, but the tools, the audio tools and audio training is not unique.
That's right.
That is, we all have these tools, and it's just the fun part is trying to figure out how we're going to do it. But like, we're all there because we know what we're doing and we know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then you bring that to bear.
Then the live circumstance is what's different. Okay, so let's not dwell on this too long so we can get everything else we want to do. Just to clarify one term that was just said earlier by, I believe, Josiah, called needle drop. And it's sort of obvious. It's brought back from the past when things came from vinyl, sound effects. Yeah. And they still call it a needle drop when they're doing a sound effects cue. And
Also background music.
Right. So this is what Josiah was referring to. Anyone who doesn't didn't know what that meant.
When I first started there, 92, 93 season, any voiceover played back on a cart was a quarter-inch.
Quarter-inch.
Quarter-inch was not SOT, was not sound on tape.
That was the difference because Dave Wilson, who was directing
Yeah.
from the beginning, came from the world of Kraft Music Hall and such. He was an AD on that show. He was Dwight Hemian's AD.
Yeah.
And so a legendary director-producer. And he wanted to, a videotape came along during his time. And he didn't want to say tape. It was a standby quarter-inch or standby videotape. It was very precise. You always knew and he would say quarter-inch. You give a cue like that. He's the only director I know who would do that, by the way.
Well, it was always in the scripts as quarter-inch.
Quarter-inch, yeah.
Okay, so just a little overview. The show started out in mono, obviously. And I'll let these guys talk about it, but this is sort of the progress of what has happened with audio. We'll clarify the famous Atmos part in a moment. So all three of you, whoever would like to tell us.
We started out in mono. We had a console that you'll see pictures of, made for us by Neve. It was the first console of that type that we ever had, having had consoles for television made by RCA, not what you would think from radio, designed purposely in a special campaign that they had in 1951. But that, whatever facilities that had, and we'll see that briefly, it was the 16 years before we got the Neve. Now we have this Neve, which was an 8-bus stereo and mono output. We didn't use the stereo except twice before season 10. And one was for a show with Rod Stewart, and that was simulcast on radio. In other words, our stereo sound, there was nowhere for the television affiliates to deal with that at that time in the mid-70s. So that was sent by some other means to another network to be on radio stations. And everything was analog, everything was in sync. There's no problem with that. Eventually, we went to stereo when Bob came in, and he can talk about what was involved in doing that. It was full stereo, and at that point, it could be full stereo because the facilities in New York and at the owned stations and most of the affiliates were capable of routing and broadcasting stereo over television. Stereo television was now on the air in people's homes. And so it said, in stereo where available is the logo that you would see, because not every station had the capability, and cable was just starting to come into its own at that point. The first stereo I heard at home was on HBO. And that
had the realistic Radio Shack external MTS decoder little thing. I had one of those, and it's like, oh, it doesn't seem like you have to fool with it like FM to get the thing right.
Yeah, I had a Sony audio receiver, and it was an HBO, Bride of Frankenstein, and this thunderstorm comes on. Oh my God, it's stereo. We weren't doing that yet. And then
5.1,
you guys.
Yeah, well, they rebuilt the control room with a new desk to accommodate the 5.1 HD, which happened together during that season. And the considerations that we had was, what do you do with it? Do you pan microphones? Do you, like, the music's already in stereo, but what do I do with the production mix? So what we do a lot of the times is I have the audience mics panned appropriately. So if you were looking straight down into the studio, the array of audience mics that we have, and there are 33 of them, are panned correctly, or what you would imagine to be correct. And now with 5.1, you could put some in the back. We have a couple in the front, and they really kind of diverge all over the place. So it does create this sense of spaciousness that you would have in 5.1. As far as production, there are times when I do pan microphones, although it's very rare. Most of what we get from sound effects is in stereo or 5.1 when appropriate. And of course, the music is also. So that's kind of our approach to it, really.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different schools of thought about what to do with 5.1 music. Our show is primarily what I like to call a proscenium show. So it's still presented to you either in stereo or 5.1 as a you are there kind of thing. Audience is here, it's around you. Certain things don't pull out too far in music. I don't want to have a mix that makes you go, oh wow, well that was cool. Because also if if someone doesn't have it set up right at home, it's there. It's
Just
not
like
there.
a Beatles record in a club where the one part's on one side and you
Yeah.
don't have the
Right.
speaker, you don't hear the whole record.
Exactly. And it's that, I like to say that 5.1 audio gives the home user 5.1 opportunities to completely screw up my mix. And we were using center channel audio for center channel vocals a lot. And then we kind of moved away from that. Part of the center channel vocal thing has been, you do not need to be the sharpest tack in the chandelier sitting in mommy and daddy's basement to learn how to pull that off the DVR recording, marry it to YouTube, and say, here is so-and-so singing with an isolated vocal. And we've all, myself, Jay, I got burned on Mariah Carey thing on the Christmas show.
Yeah, I remember that.
So this is a problem.
So
And
Phantom Stereo's back in
Phantom
effect.
Stereo's back, kick and snare. Phantom, Jay and I are going back to a little bit of center channel this season. I'm letting him drive the ship on that. I mixed the show with Lady Gaga a few months ago. I said, do you want me to adhere to that? He says, no, do whatever you want. So I had it diverged. One thing that we started doing is if there's any live music in support of a sketch, then everything is out of the center channel. So
Right.
that he has his sonic and electrical, HOV lane to get the dialogue through. Because that's what it is.
That's paramount, yes.
Yeah. And if I have too much stuff in the center channel and it's fighting for him, well, he's within his rights to just go on the music, bring it down, get some space. This way, we create that. I'm going to jump over to Atmos.
Yes,
now,
please.
because we've started to fool around with that just a little bit. If you're looking out at the audience, so you guys are the audience, and you see there are two lobes of audience on the 8th floor. There are two stereo shotgun mics over that to pick that up. That's been there for a long time. We decided to take those out completely from the 30 mic contingent of audience, and those two stereo mics now are front and rear height. We use them very sparingly, and there are also a couple of bits and bobs in the theme that play back on a loop that Sean Pelton, our drummer, starts, and it's just little sound effects and little sparkles. Those are also up above. Otherwise, it's just audience that's in the height channels right now. And
Atmos also is not broadcast.
it only shows up. Thank you. It only shows up on Peacock because there's no terrestrial broadcast of Atmos. The thing is, television is a 5.1.4 spec, and most Atmos immersive music is 7.1.4. And so the panning tools aren't quite what we would want to do. And I think this would all be static, by the way. I can't see us moving things around.
Right.
I'm not a fan of needing Dramamine to listen to something.
No, it's gimmicky too.
It can be very gimmicky.
Yeah.
And the other issue is that, especially with older records, and I'll get off this soapbox in a second, a lot of things are layered. You get a sound by layering things. And the minute you start taking those pieces of the onion apart, it's like, it's cool, and I can hear that clearly, but I don't know if I want to hear it clearly.
Right.
I want to
Some
hear
of
it.
the magic of masking is lost.
And we have spent so many decades listening to music, either perfectly coincident stereo recording of orchestra or panned stereo as a two-channel life force coming at you. And to start pulling it out requires a lot of careful thinking.
Yeah.
There is the real issue, forgive me for interrupting, real issue because I've went through this with Ed Green on certain programs that I would listen at home, and he'd call me up, how's it going? I said, well, it's not in stereo. Some project he's doing, not the Grammys, but some entertainment event of some sort. It's not in stereo. What do you mean? Well, the commercials are in stereo, which he's not doing. They're coming from Master Control or Turner this was. But the show's not in stereo. He made some phone calls. He got a response from Turner. Oops. He says, oops. we're on the air, Charlie, and hangs up. Eventually, that's the way that show played. It wasn't in stereo. So he called me up after the show. What's happening? I said, well, the next show is on. It's a movie. Yeah, it's in stereo, but the channels are reversed.
Oh,
How do you know that? Well, the guy exited screen right and the door slammed at screen left. You know, and he went to visit the Network Operations Center for Turner in Virginia, and he said there's 500 monitors for all the video streams, and 4 little rooms with the JBL speakers incorrectly installed. So you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
The opera went on the air one time on PBS, and in New York there was no vocal. So I talked to somebody. I said, how is this possible? You're at Lincoln Center. WNET is just down the road on 58 speed. He said, oh, no. The signal it's a network program. That signal goes up to Washington. It gets distributed from Washington and sent back out to the stations. Something was wrong somewhere. They got another phone call.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's all algebra.
all you can do is say, well, it sounds good leaving here.
That's right. I had a supervisor who said the trouble is okay leaving here. You know, that's a magnet that I have on my refrigerator. Nobody knows what I do until I don't do it.
Right. Yes.
That's what we all do.
Yes.
When the phone rings, what are you doing out here?
Goes back to the stress question.
The stress
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
So stress, yes.
So moving to the last part of this question, over the years, what's the medium used to record and archive the show?
I will just introduce it by saying for 10 years there was no archiving. There was the mono program that was recorded on videotape.
That was it.
It was the air check. That's it. There weren't even quarter-inch tapes, except what I might have done sideways on the side. But there was no archiving of anything. It was every week. For the first year, it was like, well, they're on for another 13 weeks. Well, they're on for another 13 weeks. And suddenly, well, they're going to stay on. Because 210 stations put it on the air every week. And so that's fine with them.
Yeah.
Then Lauren came back with Howard Shore again, and we come into now 24-track recording,
24-track.
which was the beginning of the archive.
2-inch tape on an Atari
NPR 90.
NPR 90. We did that for almost the whole season. They were just starting to come out with the Sony 3324. So we got that in the room probably the last couple of shows. And I think by the time you guys took the music room over, Jay took it over, it was only the Sony.
So we're talking about in 10th season, 85.
85,
Yes.
86, yeah.
And when I started in the music room, we had two 3324s, which we recorded production. And I would have to start them, I have to overlap.
Right.
And then there was a 3348 that only recorded music, and it only went on, we would roll it when it was music. And I was also changing videotapes and whatnot. It was insane. I think about it now. Now we have a Pro Tools with 144 tracks, which represents the 144 mic inputs I have from guest band and house band connected. And I also record a 5.1 stem from us, the LORO from them, a stereo fold down done in Pro Tools of my output, which is like a utility stereo thing. Someone needs a copy of this or someone needs a copy of that. Or if there's an elaborate monologue with just a skeleton crew on Friday of, let's say, piano and drums playing along, I will make a recording of my output and Bob's output, and I have an instant music -1 where let's say the host can be handed a couple of files or used to burn it to a CD. Here's the music with the dialogue in it. And it's just, and again, these are just audio tools that you apply to figure out how to solve the problems.
Well, also, I'm sorry not to interrupt you. There's a whole tracking room now. There's a whole separate room in which just for tracking production mics, separate from the music room.
Yeah, and that becomes part of the repeat process. And I had one thing I didn't show you some of that. And I had one
So
other.
that tracking room also has a Pro Tools rig of its own.
Yeah, it has its own Pro Tools rig.
That's the
And
basic to where it is.
and the other thing that we've had basically for the past 10 years only is a Fairlight multi-track recorder, which is our multi-track music backup, which we never used to have. Gasp, wheeze. It just was that way. But the other thing is it has a video recorder in it. So that's locked for everything, so that it's perfect on a Thursday when the artist comes in to listen to what we've done, and I'll always have picture up because they'll be watching, and I'll say, "How does it sound?" Like, "Sounds fine." What the hell is that? You know, it's great.
See, that's the thing, before we had the music room, as I say, they couldn't come in and see anything.
Yeah.
They would go away.
Yeah.
That was it, and they'd talk amongst themselves, you know, and come back a Saturday with, well, we'd like to try something different. And now, on top of everything else, all these pieces, every microphone, every camera, every graphic, dress rehearsal and air, and the intercom
Yes.
is recorded for posterity for use in fashioning concept shows, you know, theme shows and repeats, syndicated material. You don't have to take the show apart and have graphics to cover this and that. It's everything you need is already there.
Yeah, it's very heavily archived.
The life of Fifth Saturday Night Live is available on, I'll call it YouTube, but it's available on the website. And you want to see a sketch with Chris Farley and so, and it'll show you, yeah, how about these two sketches? And they're
That's
all
also
there.
used a lot internally for research on the show.
Yes,
too.
yes.
Yeah, it's the show has a very big afterlife, and I feel like I put on my music mixer hat and then I put on my post-production hat,
Right.
because myself and another gentleman, Devin Emke, we will mix the repeats.
Right.
And we go from all of that raw material, and it would just clean up everything. And it's like comparing apples and lava as far as it has. I could never do Bob's job. I just couldn't. I would just be a puddle. But he has a different mandate, if you will, from putting that on the air. And what we do in the repeats is clean everything up so that it can be archived as a separate audience stem, music, dialogue, sound effects in VT. And sometimes the show will get repackaged, and we don't want to pay for that music. Well, we'll put in some library music. And if that music played back live, not being too loud in the PA, so that it doesn't come into the lavs, it didn't come in too much into the booms of the audience. New music can be slugged in on top of that. You can almost always tell because the music seems a little loud.
Because you're covering whatever.
Because you're trying to cover some leakage. But that can be a very lucrative afterlife. It is a lucrative afterlife for the show and for international syndication and everything. So, yeah, it went from like, you get what you got. You get what you get and you don't get upset, to now everything is down to the last field and frame,
Right.
massageable. Because we can.
Right. So basically, you can't say no if the chief calls for something because he knows you have it all separated. If they ever were to be
Yeah.
a situation like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might say this sketch played better in dress, or this film played better in dress, right? You sometimes
Yeah,
go
well,
to
sometimes,
the...
or there may be, if you're watching on Pro Tools, like this much comes from dress. There'll be a couple lines or something, or there'll be a video edit that's been done between dress and air, and you'll get a note because that sounds like it was done with a chainsaw. You know, I can futz with frame lines a little better. So, and I will say each one of those things, if we're doing a best of show, and it's a laugh and then a laugh this and that, and I have archived laughs to facilitate edits in a best of show. And people say, well, how long is it going to take to put this together? And it's like, I don't know, because each one of those edits is its own unique problem to solve.
That's right.
Because the other thing is, these things are cut for the jokes, but the laugh usually is longer. So you have the trail of the laugh and all of that. And people will say, oh, I think they should have used this or that. No, the civilian is going to say, sounds weird.
Yeah.
And that's the kiss of death.
We had this situation where, first of all, on the air, there's no supplementary laugh.
Never.
Laughs happen
never.
or they don't happen. And that's his absolute mandate. We were given an experiment to do one time, which I talked about, you were mixing, I think, at that point. Some sketch really died. A sketch at 5 minutes to 1. It was terrible. It was on the air because Lauren said to us, this writer hasn't got anything on the air all season, and I've got to put something on. So we're putting this on, and it's probably going to die, and he's going to have to learn from that. You know, he's going to have to step up, or he won't be back. So I went over to watch with him the post-production, and we were given very specific instructions. Put a laugh here and see what happens. So we took a laugh from somewhere in the show, we put it there. All right, well, we said, well, if we put a laugh there, the next thing is actually kind of funny. We better put a laugh there. Well, we put in 3 laughs, and we called Stacey Foster. We said, this sounds so hokey, it's ridiculous. It doesn't merit any laughs. It's done, forget it. Thanks, see it. The only time there's corrections like that is in repeats, or our little dodge at the beginning of the show, which you still do with the recorded applause. Because Lauren wants the announcer to be incredibly loud in the PA, and the band to be incredibly loud in the PA for the opening of the show, so the audience is all revved up. Well, you can't put that on the air. We gave up after a couple of seasons.
Well,
And we sat with Bill Taylor, and we said, let's just take applause, real applause, from Saturday Night Live. And we'll put that on at the beginning of the show. You can talk about the choreography of that.
Well, there are times when I do sneak in some real audience
Yeah.
now. I don't. It's not exclusively the sound effect anymore. That's a recent change in the last few years.
Yeah, but it helps a lot.
and
Yeah.
typically I'm the guy harvesting the applause, which is
Right.
almost always after the music numbers,
Right.
because it's a long, unfettered thing,
Uninterrupted.
and then you don't have all of a sudden the house band kicking in, and
Right.
that renders that useless, or a line comes in. But the other issue with the taped applause, the canned applause, is that Don Pardo always used to announce the show live.
Right.
Once we got into the repeats and Don was multi-track, he had the announce had its own line. Sometimes Don would be a little late or a little early to the graphic. So you can slide him a bit. Well, the minute you slide him, he's out of sync with the audience.
Right.
So you can't use the audience. You have to put the loop in.
Right.
Now a lot of Daryl Hammond is on tape.
Yeah.
So
It used to be that the closing announce, when we got everything on the air in those days, the closing announce was next week, our guest will be this one
Right.
and that one. This is Don Pardo saying good night. So
this
we
is Don
have
Pardo
to,
saying this is
this is Don Pardo. They'd have to be able to fix that in the edit room, and this was 2-inch videotape. They'd have to just screw around with it. And then eventually he stopped doing that. But we've also put in the applause at the end.
Yeah.
To cover that.
Back in
So
those
that he
days,
would
we
be
did.
clean,
Yes.
The applause would be clean, the band would be clean, There's all these little dodges that are necessary.
We didn't touch on the applause in our pre-production discussion. We did talk about the fact that the show is not taped, it's live. And the question on the screen now, how is the word live transformed? Really, the only big transformation.
Well, the big transformation is, I don't know how many years we've been doing this now. We've been live to every time zone.
At least 10 years.
So California
Yeah.
sees it at 8:30.
At 8:30, but they also get a refeed at 11:30.
11:30.
Yeah. I mean, we probably missed something. Let's watch it again.
People will often ask these guys, so when is the show taped?
Right.
No, it's not live before a studio audience taped the way Colbert's announcer says every night.
Yeah.
It's an actual live to broadcast.
Where do they
Yes.
film Saturday Night Live?
Yes. Yeah, get
I
that
gotta
question.
say this. One time, and then sometime in the past 30 years, maybe in my first 10 years on the show, get in a cab really late on a Friday, going home. Cab driver says, "Oh, you work at NBC, blah, 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 whatever. Saturday Night Live." "Oh, yeah. That's when they tape that on Friday." I'm like, "No, they do not." "No, I had a person in my car. One of the cast said he was in the cast. He says they recorded it on Friday night." And I said, "Well, then what do they do on Saturday?" He goes, "I don't know. I think they stay home and watch it." And this guy was like dead serious. And he said, "Is that true?" I said, "If that is true," I said, "then I have been the victim of an incredible
Hoax.
Yeah, big hoax.
on the scale that, like they do for
32-year-old
30
hoax.
Mission Impossible,
Yeah.
level sort of
Holy
thing.
moly.
And when people say, again, when do you tape it? "No, we're not. We're live." "No, you're not live." I said, "Hey, you remember Ashley Simpson?" "Oh yeah, that was crazy." I
Well,
said,
that was live.
"Do you think we would have put that on the air, and or they would have allowed us to do that?" And then you hear the relays and you smell the insulation scorching, and they're like, "Oh, okay."
So it is live.
It is live. It is live.
Was that the first time that the audio department really got highlighted with the Ashley Simpson thing?
Well, what got highlighted was her thing. I mean,
yeah.
we were just accurately doing. It's probably the first time I've seen the show come to a complete screeching grinding gears, metal shavings coming out of the back of the
The
car.
track that was played by her band.
Band.
It was not the technicians who handled that. They have the okay to, we have this track and we have to play it. It's okay, you're
For many years,
responsible for it.
tracking was not allowed. Track dates were not allowed.
There were here and there
They were
a
here
few
and
things.
there.
We had James Taylor was on tour, and the number was Shower the People. They don't carry the background singers with them on tour. He had this gorgeous Technics tape recorder, front and center, right in front of the stage.
I think
And
I remember that.
And it was photocell edited, so that he'd start it a time, and it would stop and be ready for the next cue. Philip Glass.
And that was
had
actually
people,
adorable. I thought that was, I
It was
remember that.
perfect,
I was
but
like,
they made a
that's so
thing
cool.
about it.
They made a thing about it.
Now on the second show, Art Garfunkel was promoting My Little Town. We had to bring in, Phil Ramone brought in an Ampex, because we didn't have Ampex, with the backing track, and he sang live to this track.
So I'm wrong. Tracking has really been a
They've
thing from
tracking
the
over
start.
the years. I
Yeah.
mean, Lorne doesn't feature it because he wants an act that's promoting something interesting. You know?
NBC 75th anniversary show, which we did, Andy Williams singing Moon River.
Yeah.
And the background vocals were on Pro Tools playback, coming from back in our room, not down the hall.
Right.
Now, so many acts travel with it. As far as I'm concerned, it's part of the input list.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, can we
But
play it back from your room? No, because we play back from our room. It has to get down to monitor world. It has to get down to
Right.
PA world, and then come back to us to get tracked.
Right.
No, it's become, the
Right.
point of the realm. There's
That's
so
the way
many
I
people.
feel.
All right, so the next part of our presentation is a lovely photo timeline that Joel has put together for us. Very informative. And,
And you do need something, even though I said I didn't. Go ahead.
okay,
What's
Go
your?
ahead.
All right.
Walk out of the frame. Go ahead.
you know,
Get it. Staff will get it for you.
audio guys
Joe.
remembering microphones, it's a rough thing.
I didn't want to sit.
I know.
As a performance.
It's my style to make a point of something like that. So we're going to carry on now. Yes,
Okay.
we can do that.
So we're going to see a fairly brief history of what Studio 8H used to do as a radio studio, what the equipment was, what kind of procedures were, what the layout was. And then we're going to see it turned into a television studio. We're going to see it changed into a color television studio. And then Saturday Night Live comes along and everything changes. So this is the RCA building. That's what we do. It's the RCA building. It's a 70-story skyscraper, which is part of 3 buildings that are adjacent to each other. Next to it is the 16-story studio building. I'm sorry, the 11-story studio building. And you see here this blank wall. And the verticals underneath it are also blank. It's just decoration. Only 2 floors have windows because there were no studios on those floors, the 2nd floor and the 5th floor. Everything else is behind these walls, which are 2 feet thick. And there's 11 stories of studios. 8H is the biggest of those studios. And we're going to take a look in here. This is the 8th floor in 1933 when the building was first built. The large space on the right is 8H. All these over here are radio studios. Only one of them has survived to this day. That's where Josiah operates in the kind of expanded space of that. All of this were radio studios. There were 8 radio studios on this floor, different sizes, different purposes. 8H is the biggest.
This was built from Tuscany.
No, this was built to do radio shows of all types. Toscanini came along 4 years later. 4 years later.
Joel, before you move away.
Yeah.
Really here?
Not anymore. They're slabbed over. There was a whole series of back hallways and corridors, technical corridors, and special elevators for the staff. These here and these here. And they're no longer in use. But you had studios from 2 up to 9, including the double height studios. And this way, the engineers and production staff didn't have to be in need of the passenger elevators. They could just go where they had to go. What you're going to see here is in 8H, this is 10,000 square feet, 3 stories tall. This is one of 2 radio control rooms here. This control room was the primary control room. We'll see a picture in a minute. 1 engineer, a director, maybe 1 other person. You're going to see along this wall a big stage, and you're going to see here 1,200 chairs, which could get put out for the 8th floor audience.
Before you move away from there,
Yeah.
see where it says children's room up
Yes.
there? Just a little bit down from there,
Yeah,
up in that corner, where it's not on this picture,
right.
is where the music mix room is. So I'm down there,
You come around the
and back in that corner is where all the mic panel is, and all the, and coming over from the stages.
Right. So there's 2 things to keep in mind. This space here, the radio control room, and this chorus room here. It's a big chorus room for dressing and such for large-scale choruses that you might have on Tuscany, doing Beethoven's Ninth. Down at the other end of the studio is another chorus room. All these spaces became up for grabs over the years. They went away as chorus rooms. This is the 9th floor, the upper part of Studio 8H, and the point here is to show you that although I mentioned we put on the deck 1,200 folding chairs, this here represents 3 rows of 200 red leather seats. This is all gone. This is not where the Saturday Night Live audience sits. They sit in bleachers that are scenery, that are part of the that are not built into the studio. They reside in the studio, and they have been removed on a number of occasions in the early years of the show, when the people who had the first dibs on set on 8H, the news department, wanted the studio for election night and space shot coverage. We have to take everything out of the studio. We will get into that in a while. So this is quite luxurious. We're going to see a picture now. Here is the unfinished studio. It's almost finished. Most people have not seen this picture. And certainly at nice resolution. It came about terrific timing. This is that where the 3 rows of seats are, set into the wall. And here are these big arches, steel arches, to help support this 10,000 square foot column-free space. We're going to see, it's not here in the next picture, you'll see some other things. Over here on the opposite wall is where there is a stage for radio. Let's have a look at that. This is now, again, from the opposite direction, with the 1,200 seats with no people, and the 200 seats in the 9th floor. So this wall was eventually covered over, and the Saturday Night Live bleachers are here.
In front of that.
In front of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the radio control room on the 8th floor. This is the second control room on the 9th floor.
That window still exists. That's
Yeah, it's the writers'
Oh,
room
yes.
now. Yeah.
That was the TV control room at one point.
Yeah.
But that's the writer's room, and Lauren has an office back over here. But this now is a stage which has telescoping platforms, as needed, more or less, to be exposed, to be used by performers. These you'll see a little bit better in another picture. 4 big horns for vocal reinforcement. This is the total extent of the PA in this studio and any radio studio in the building. Nobody else had horns like that, but just voice when necessary.
RCA, of course.
Also, Joel,
That's the-
those HVAC dumps, you
Yeah.
can see one there. You look up into the gloom and past the blinding lights,
Yeah.
you can still see
Oh, they're still there.
they're
The
still
air supply
there.
is there, and you can't see it too clearly here, but here and on the other side, and behind the stage, was tremendous air supply. You know, and because you've got to air condition 1,200 people in a room, and right just above us, behind this wall, this is the 10th floor. Behind this wall is the air conditioning department. 900-ton air conditioning system, originally designed in 1933 to deliver whisper quiet air to 40 studios. And there's a lot of documentation of this, which is fascinating. We can put that up on the website. There's a booklet that was written all about this. The pictures and illustrations, we can't go into all that now. But it's really staggering, the engineering that went into spending the floors of all these studios. They're all isolated from the building. The building was adjacent to the elevated subway on 6th Avenue.
Just basically out that way.
Yeah, that side, yes.
That side, yeah.
That's the west side. And even though there's a building between there and 6th Avenue, then the subway got built underneath, all in bedrock. And so everything is isolated. One studio was built after the war. There's an experiment, 6D. It's the scene dock on the 6th floor. They built that for stereo, and there was a big rush job, and engineering was told, you can't suspend that floor. We don't have the money or the time. They opened up the mics. What's that rumbling? That's the D train. Close the mics, goodbye. End of project. You know. So you really have to have all that done.
So you were saying that the stage has a telescoping, it can be expanded and
Yeah.
retracted.
Yeah. Here's a view from the audience of a similar thing, shows the horns a little better. These are just architectural screens to store extra chairs and materials behind them. Here is the stage in use. This is only a few months after the building was opened. This is Jessica Dragonette, a very famous singer at that time, with about a 30-piece group.
Wasn't she the voice of Snow White?
No, that was somebody else. That's an Italian name.
Andrea Castello.
Andreas. Something, yes.
The gentleman all the way on your right is a voiceover announcer?
Well, an announcer.
Announcer. He's not a singer.
Not as, no, he's got the script. He's
Yeah.
holding the script. He's
Sorry.
addressing the mic in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's how that would be done. It's hard to see, but there are a couple of mics. Crowfoot stand, probably all 44 bi-direction mics. It's very popular, which is how you would pick up the ambience of the audience reaction.
Joel,
Yeah,
there are vents on the side of the stage there.
yeah.
Those are vents or speakers?
Those are vents. No, the only speakers are the ones you saw overhead. Those are vents because you've got 1,200 people to take care of. They're supplemental. It's an opportunity to take the air that's from the back wall, which you've seen in the picture, and bring it out forward.
But and blower motors did not affect anything?
It's all managed. This is a view of a similar setup, but from the 9th floor, and you can see the 3 rows of seats and how everything is laid out in the studio. This is Toscanini. We have a couple pictures. The point of this picture is to show you that there are 3 44s up here picking up the orchestra. And 2 of them went to the main control room, the 3rd one went to the 2nd control room, because there's a lot of international broadcasting. NBC had not just the red and the blue domestic networks, they had the white network, which is broadcasting by shortwave from Bound Brook, New Jersey, to Europe. And this is showing that the orchestra here is using every inch of that platform and all the side.
And that is Toscanini,
That's Toscanini.
not Albert Einstein.
No, that's Artie. Apparently he used to hum loudly
Oh, well, he would sing and hum.
and off key too.
We have recordings of that. We did a whole series on Radio Network that I worked on for a while with one of the gentlemen who produced all those shows, Don Gillis. And we have Toscanini rehearsal, and he would sing to the orchestra when he wasn't yelling at the orchestra. And he would yell at the orchestra a lot, curse at them in Italian. You don't understand anything about me. You're pigs. Oh, they gave him a stopwatch. He threw it back at them about an hour later. He was very, very temperamental, but you have to remember that Toscanini at this point had been conducting for 50 years. He premiered Verdi operas at La Scala. Yeah. He knows what it's supposed to sound like, and they hired all these people. He knows they can do it, but he's got to rev them up and have them do it the way he wants it. And he would also speak to the engineers and the producer. He'd come in and listen to something and say, "That's good. Give me tape. Don't touch that." This is from someone who was there. It's the story. So it was quite something. I heard these on the radio. Eventually, there were simulcasts of these broadcasts in the late 40s and early 50s. Equipment would be brought in from across the hall from AG, because there was no TV control room here yet. This studio hadn't been yet converted to television. I couldn't find any pictures of the cameras. They went There's no crest photography, aside from this, of the TV setup. And there's no pictures of catching a camera in the scene because that wasn't done. It
Right.
just wasn't done. Rowie had asked, did we have any pictures of the TV setup? We did all that. I'm checking the notes. Control rooms, okay. And let's see. This is the original control room. We don't have any decent pictures of that console. I'll show you a similar console. As a matter of fact, to me, this looks like a kind of a Photoshop type job from the 30s. This has been pasted together, but this is the view. The window's a little too big, I think, for this.
Yeah.
But this is the view. There are the vents I talked about. This air supply with the curtain not there. Here are the overhead speakers. This is the client booth up here for them to listen, watch the show, but listen to it behind glass over a speaker. He has, I'm going to guess he has about 6 or so or 10 faders. That's what he has. He has over here, and maybe 1 or 2 groups, maybe that's it. He has over here this patch panel, which is using what are called drop cords. And they are double plug patch cords, which represent microphone preamp inputs. And he has a number of preamps and more outlets than he has faders for. So he would decide, I need this here, and this one to go here, and this one to go here. There's some subsidiary patching behind him. But that's it. It's one person, one output, and he has some communication equipment. But that's the story. If he wanted to have reverb, not on one of these shows, but on a dramatic show, there are 2 ways to do that. The studios on the 3rd floor, which are double height studios, they had movable wall panels, floor to ceiling, and they were motorized, 3 on each side of these studios, which are 25 by 40. You could expose more and more reverberant surfaces by retracting these panels, or less by closing them up. The panels were only removed within the last 5 years. Son took me down there. We took pictures of all this stuff. They were there the whole time. And those studios have been repurposed and reused and other things done with them. The windows were there from when they were radio studios, and the panels were there. And the other way is to have echo from echo chambers. And there were 5 echo chambers, which are shafts in the building of various lengths. There's a speaker at one end, microphone at the other end. And depending on what you wanted, you had to order in advance the use of these echo chambers, and Master Control would patch you into them and then back to you.
Do you know where they were in the building?
They're associated with the stairways that are going.
Because the stairways are magnificent. I've always wanted to try to use the stairway.
Somewhere near there were these echo chambers. They're not really on the map. And there's nobody alive now who knows where they were. They were removed eventually, but you would order 1 mic echo or overall echo. Those were the terms. We did that now. So down the road, we now had other devices and ways of doing echo, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a typical situation. This is a similar console from a later studio. This is the console in Studio 6A from 1941. And you see not too many knobs, very uncluttered. Something similar was done for
It's an RCA.
RCA-made console. It's not you couldn't buy this console.
Right.
It was all made
Custom made for the solutions.
NBC. The same thing in 6B. And that console may have survived into the Tonight Show era in 6B, where there's a control up on the 7th floor. Again, patching and racks that you don't see. This is the PA console from Studio 6A in 1941, and it's typical of what you had in all the studios at that time. There just was vocal reinforcement. An announcer, maybe there was some music from recording, maybe, and something from another city, maybe, and your cast mics, 1 or 2 cast mics, and you probably got those as groups from inside, from the broadcast console, and not a lot of level. This console was still there when the Tonight Show was doing Johnny Carson in 6B until this early 70s, and the PA was only for voice. In 6B, which is where the Tonight Show comes from now, nowhere near that sound level that's being done now. Nowhere near it at all. And that's another issue that the guys will talk about in a while. The Tonight Show band, I could go to hear their rehearsals when I was working there in the 60s, early 70s. It's like the Count Basie band. It's a gorgeous band. What do you say, 20 pieces or so probably? And with the string section, if Sammy Davis Jr. was going to be on it. Always came with string sections, which had to go out onto the stage. But this band balanced itself. It was unbelievable. You come in at 2:15, they lay the music down in front of them, and they would sight read these charts. And that's what went on the air, and it was no processing for PA, and really only AGC, automatic gain control, applied gently to the program. And everything was fine. There wasn't all this mania for individual miking of every single
The
instrument.
AGC was some kind of Fairchild?
No, it was RCA.
BA-25.
BA-25. Before that, the BA-3C, which was a transmitter limiter. That Columbia Records had a Studio C at 30th Street. They had 3 of those. And it's bulletproof. You cannot screw that up. The BA-25 is very good also. You'll see that added later on to
You can see that. You can see the headphone jacks over here in the
When
front.
did you get permission to go non-RCA?
Well, the first thing we got was Fairchild. That was in the 60s. Those Lumitem consoles that were horrible, but they were an expansion. I don't have any pictures. I have pictures of those. We're not showing any of them because they were never in AH. But it was a 42-position console with 5 submasters, and it worked by light attenuation. You had 2 light bulbs for each fader. And nobody told us for 8 years that you shouldn't leave the faders down when you finish the job. You should leave them halfway up, turn off the master. Because that way both light bulbs burn equally. If you bring the faders down, one light bulb is going to burn out. And sooner or later, the fader's going to open up on the air. It's a disaster. Fairchild, but not the best product. This is where everything went to get on the air. We have 3 pictures from Radio Master Control on the 5th floor. 46 studios, not all hard studios, some were utility positions to manage remotes and such. 46 studios to 14 output lines. That's how much business they were doing. We went to recordings and other cities, international, 3 people. There are, it says here, 2,700 lamps in this console, which is 27 feet long. Console was there until 1963, when there then were only 4 radio studios. There wasn't any need for this. It was demolished. Closer look at one of the supervisors. Each of these up here, which you'll see in a close-up, represents switches for one studio. And you assign your studio, the studio in question, to these kind of switches down here, which were the actual output channel routers. He's got little meters here to see things. We're managing at all times 2 networks, the red network, NBC, and the blue network, which the government made them spin off, and it became ABC. And eventually ABC had to leave the building because they needed more room than we could provide. Here's the super close-up. These are the studios on the 8th floor. And so 8A, 8B, 8C, 8D, 8E. So 8E and 8F, just mentioned very quickly, there were 4 tiny studios in the building. They called them speakers studios. So if the mayor or the governor or Lindbergh was going to be, or Mrs. Roosevelt was going to be on the radio by herself, it looked like a den. Wood paneling, and the mic is in the lamp, and all this, and you just did your thing, and someone gave you a cue, and you went on the air. You may have been able to see the director.
So there was a visual control which was radio.
Yeah, and eventually, those were all removed. There were 2 on the 9th floor, 2 on the 8th floor. So that's how all this stuff got on the air. Now, the other end of all this is this. Terminal blocks. Thousands of wires connecting the studios, the equipment room, which is on the other side of that wall, with hundreds of racks of analog equipment, and master control. And this is the main distribution frame. It's called, this is in a room behind the big desk that you saw. That terminology comes from the phone company.
No hum.
A lot of mic level.
No, they were going.
Copper.
Those are Christmas trees.
Christmas tree cut. That's
Yeah.
the first time we use the word Christmas tree. The second time will come in a few minutes. But they're all spread out so that you can easily connect your wires. This is before Amphenol 25, 50 pin connectors, etc. Pre-made cables. This is all done by hand, and it was done right through the 80s.
It was done right.
And it was done right. It was all military
You
specifications.
never wanted to do it wrong.
You couldn't do wrong. The 9 people are going to jump all over you. There's no room to screw that up anyway. There's hundreds of connections.
I used to do this. We used Western Electric wire, solid. It had a cloth covering
That's right.
and an enamel, and you didn't strip it with a sharp tool. You crimped it with some long-nosed pliers, and then the braid and the nylon would just fall off.
Right.
And we had a documentation for those
That's
blocks
right.
too.
That's right.
Some of it was bike level, but a lot of it was minus 22, 30
Right.
dB below +8.
Right.
And that was the way we sent audio around, like to tape machines and stuff like that.
I'm doing it. Web those. Putting
That's
the
right.
web on was an art in itself.
And the tags. But those books, I've seen those books. This is what's on these blocks.
Yep.
From here to here, pair this to here, purpose, and where the other end of it went.
Mm-hmm.
Loose leaf books. And by God, it was until they'd go and consult those things, the lug counts, they call
Yeah,
it,
lug counts.
you had to find out where these cables were connected when you had to remove them. And there was an enormous project, which I'll just take a moment to talk about, the grand staircase, which you're not seeing in any pictures here, from the lobby up to the mezzanine. And that's where you waited to go on the tour with these huge, this big, as big as these mirrors, photographs made by Margaret Burke-White of electronics and radio. It was amazing, amazing photography. And you went up there and waited to go on your tour. Well, General Electric came in and they bought us. General Electric said, we don't need this. We want to put offices there. So they demolished all that and put offices there, and they said, we don't need this staircase. Take the staircase out. And someone up came, said, well, all right, there's a project we had in mind, now we could do it. Take the staircase out. From the basement up to the 9th floor, we now had a space on every floor to run cables to intermediate distribution frames, the core riser project. And that lasted until Comcast came in. And Comcast, looking at the photographs of the old days, said, where's the lounge for the tours? Where's the grand staircase? There's no entrance to the place. What is this all about? Make us a project where we put the staircase back. Oh, okay. There's 3,000 cables going up in this core riser. And they brought Paul Winter out of retirement, who had to help install this in the first place. They had to die-root all those cables. They had to make all those cables come back now and get them out of the way of the staircase. And mind you, half these wires, there was an opportunity to replace 99% of it with fiber optic. So it was a blessing. This went in line with the project to mine the skating rink with cables. Because the Today Show was forever going out to the skating rink, and they have to drag 500-foot cables from wherever they were, etc. So this is the kind of remodeling and repurposing of spaces, wholesale moving of the equipment room to a different floor, thousands of cables, thousands of connections. Oh, we got to do that. Okay, here's the money. Do it.
When I first started, I remember it was fall of '92, so it was an election year, all sorts of stuff going on, and I passed by Madison Square Garden where there was some convention happening, and I saw this truck with like my arm span of cable just pouring into this thing. And I said to Bob Sazer, I said, it must take forever to coil all that stuff up.
And he looked at me. I wouldn't have stopped him if he smacked me. He said, they just cut it and they drive the truck away. And because there are companies out there that will gladly take all of that and melt this down and get the copper and all of that. It never occurred to me that much stuff, expensive stuff, was considered, okay, goodbye.
Expendable. Well, because that was going inside.
Yeah.
There's 12 pair, 15 pair, 27 pair going inside to
other fan
populate
outs,
everywhere. Now, an event show today does not do that. An event show, first of all, thank God, now a lot of it is fiber. But you had in your time schedule the proper pulling, disconnecting, and pulling out of retrieving these 500-foot, 1,000-foot cables onto spools, and they went back on the truck and back to the shop because it was expensive, and we needed it next week for golf. Yeah. So we had 4 or 5 mobile units. Bob worked in them, and I worked in them on special events. And the point is that you had to have a plan. Now we did the skating rink, we did the Christmas tree show. The last year we did the skating rink show. The union for the electricians at the skating rink, they decided that they want to be in charge of running all the cables and then coiling up all the cables at the end of the day. They did a crummy job of putting out the cables. We had to fix that on overtime. And then we had to undo everything they did when they were trying to coil these 500-foot cables. They had no experience doing it. So there's a reason for a plan and all this stuff. Where are we now? The Radio City Music Hall in '76 was renovated. All the copper cable came out of that and was sold. We replaced with new cable. Now we're going to go into converting this studio to television. And to do that, this is the 9th floor. To do that, the upstairs radio control room was repurposed and extended all around here into some of these seats. So part of that seating area goes away.
Joel?
Yes.
Was 8H ever used as a stereo radio studio?
No, there was no stereo radio. There was no stereo. An FM stereo that was automated on NBC. That was a group of tape machines on the 5th floor that played back prepackaged programs. We never had any real stereo. We did some radio. We did a couple of music specials over the years, but they were not live. There are a couple of things that were recorded by RCA Records in Carnegie Hall in stereo, and they never got released. They didn't get approved. Yeah. The Symphony of the Air. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
TV. Yeah. So we have to move it along because we're really into the time.
It's coming to dawn.
Coming to dawn, yes. So we're going to show you this control room here, and the stage was taken out, and the rigging, which you'll see later on, the stage rigging was put in, which really messed up the acoustics, I must say. This is the console. We'll see that RCA designed for its studios in New York, for NBC studios in New York and Los Angeles. It's purpose-built. There's a whole brochure about this. There's a whole issue of a magazine devoted to this. We'll get you the reference to that. And I'll go a little quicker now because we're getting tight on time. You went from just a few receptacles to 24. What does this say? 24 microreceptacles and wall boxes all around the studio. So now you could use the entire studio to do things. You didn't have the 1,200 audience chairs. If there was an audience, they were upstairs for a number of years. You have now 12 inputs and 3 submasters, 1 output, 1 person, and there are controls in here which we'll get into now. And just to show you, mention this space here. This is an open space, and we have 5 video monitors pointing up at a mirror that the engineer could see the 4 cameras in the studio and the program monitor, so he'd know what's on the air. This is on one side. You have an applause mixer. You would put 4 mics in there, and they would get assigned to a fader. You would assign your 12 faders to the submasters. These are all color coded. You'll see that in a minute. Each fader could go to 1 submaster.
All the electronics still vacuum.
Everything vacuum tube, yes. And thank goodness. This section of controls, I'll just get into very quickly, is a sound effects filtering device which could connect microphone preamps to whatever camera was on the air. And so you could have a telephone conversation scene where you're talking to me and the camera's with me, your mic is filtered so that we hear you, we know you're on the telephone. When my camera comes on, the reverse happens automatically. Your mic is not filtered and my mic is filtered for telephone. It could be used for perspective effects, etc. But there's three filters, and there's 4 cameras, and you can turn the whole thing on or off. There's some EQ for that down here, and some gain makeup down here. And then on the other side, again, these drop cords that we talked about, those are preamps. There's a lot more patching in the back wall, but there's some other controls in here that I just found out about today. Some of these controls have to do with automatic gain control, which at that point would have been a VA3 amplifier. Compressor, you could select compression or limiting. I didn't know anything about this until this morning. It's interesting. When you wanted to have reverb, you still did the same thing. You used echo chambers. You had to order them. And you had a system to send audio to the echo chamber and return it to an echo return fader. There's also a means of bringing in one of 2 remote points. And we use the phone company, wonderful terminology, MIMO, not emanating from main office. For 50 years, NBC's called remotes MIMOs. Eventually, thanks to Mr. Straczynski, that went away. And all they're called the remotes. Okay, the remotes, fine. You see the use of color here. The buttons, you can just see a couple of these submaster assignment buttons there. They would track with your 3 submasters. And the marking strip is glass or etched glass, and the illumination would change behind the marking strip, so you would know right away what submaster your fader was assigned to.
So it's not a VU.
This is a VU.
No.
No, those are marking strips.
And you would use a wax pen
China marker.
marker to put your
Right.
note on it.
Yes, so you're right. There's no tape required. Nobody did that in those days. Wax pencils, yes. Blaisdell 160. Of course, you mark on your editorial block, you would mark. Now, here's a view of this console 10, 12 years later. The consoles had to get hot rodded. There weren't enough inputs. And so these boxes were installed with 4 faders and a submaster, 1 on each side. So now you had a total of 24 inputs. This is a big step up from radio. And it was pretty much, would help you out. To fit those in there, the monitors had to be removed. They weren't projection monitors anymore. They were regular monitors, Conrack black and white monitors. And here's a selector to select what goes on that monitor. It's the audio person's choice.
And some trusty Pultecs.
2 Pultec equalizers. We'll see pictures of them later. General purpose equalization. It could also be used for the telephone effects filter if you needed it. But general purpose, this was in all the recording studios in the 50s, made in Englewood, New Jersey. Pulse Techniques. A&R recording. At one point, they had 24 of those, 12 in each in 2 racks, in one studio. That was a big deal. You bet. Mm-hmm. This is
very heavy.
Very heavy and very hot. Yeah. This is television master control. Television master control was built in 1951. It is a baby version of what you saw in radio. This had 8 output lines, and you had 20 sub-studios, some of which were real, some of which were dummy studios, to bring in Washington and Burbank and Chicago to send them to studios or to put them directly on one of 8 output lines. This is before color. This picture is probably when it was first opened. It survived until the 70s, so it had about a 25-year run. And then around the corner, down the hall, the engineering lab was gutted and made into something called Switching Central, which was the first computer-assisted system for us. We won't go into that at all. It was very successful in its operation. Why am I showing? Oh, at this point now, okay. So at this point, we're now going to talk about the fact that we did all this. Thank you. In '62, the company decided to convert 8H to color. So the equipment from the Ziegfeld Theater, not the movie theater that's there now, but where the office building is on 6th Avenue, 54th Street, was Mr. Ziegfeld Theater. And it was occupied by us on a rental basis for 10 years, about 10 years. The Perry Como show came from. The TK-41 color cameras were brought from there to this studio along with the switcher and enhanced effects capability. To do that, we had to enlarge further this encroachment into the balcony seats, because now you didn't have just one guy with 4 consoles to do black and white video. You had racks of equipment and multiple people to operate the color controls for these cameras. Eventually, as I say, all of those seats disappeared. There were bleachers that came out of this wall. We don't have pictures right now, but this wall had folding bleachers which could come out and serve for floor audience on TV shows. There's a close-up here, which we'll see in a minute. This will show you where the television control room was on that wall, on the 8th floor. The chorus dressing room was gutted, and so the radio control room became the video room. Next to it, there's a bunch of racks, and next to it, the audio room, a trapezoid-shaped audio room with absolutely no architectural, acoustical treatment whatsoever. We did the show. And next to it, the nice big production control room with the director, the TD, technical director, associate director, producers, production assistants. And next to that, electronic graphics, Chiron 2. That's that corner of the studio, and that's where the control room was from 1975 until the 90s, right? When all of that was gutted, and it's no longer engineering space. The prop department. And so we had, this is where you are, but we won't talk about that yet. This is where the music room ended up, on the far end of the 8th. Yep, you have the drawings. So this is a typical setup for Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live came about because the company was told by Johnny Carson he didn't want the Tonight Show repeats to run on the weekend. It devalued the show. The company engaged Lorne Michaels to create a comedy variety show. And he had seen the Hal Prince production of Candide on Broadway, which was completely enveloping the audience. That's what he wanted. He got some of that. So what you see here is on where it says home base. This is the west wall where the radio stage was. This is a series of stages. And over the years, it's been configured in different ways. This is not from season 1. But different things have been in different areas here. In the first show, this is where the Muppets were. And we have in the audience tonight my girlfriend, Rhonda Hansen, who was one of the Muppeteers for the first Saturday Night Live. I did not meet her then. I met her 30 years later under other circumstances. Rhonda's a brilliant writer, director, stand-up comedian, and at the time, she became the president of the New York Puppetry, thanks to Jim Henson's employment of her.
How do you publish?
Wow. I don't, as an audio professional, I do not condone mic drops, but yeah.
I've actually gotten one mic drop from Josiah in the last few years. Truly honored. And so
we had to
that
wait.
was a great, he doesn't give them out too easily.
We had to wait almost 2 hours for that. I mean, thank God we had it. You know, my dear friend, Mr. Bialik, we've worked together for many, many years on many projects for the AES.
So the immersive theater.
The immersive theater, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
It tends to be the guest music is over here in this area, and other comedy is over here. The house band is now part of home base. We won't go into
I will say,
all the
I've
other
mixed
layout.
Ed Sheeran all 3 times he's been on the show. I think I remember Undercover Sharpton. I was here for this show. I don't remember any of these sketches.
This is
I don't
this is
remember any.
2014.
Well, you don't watch the show. So.
2014. Hey, that's our anniversary week, April 12th.
Yeah.
When we met around that time many years ago. Here's what the studio looks like now without those recessed seats. These are 3 rows of scenery. This is scenery. This is scaffolding. This is the scaffolding that I alluded to earlier in the evening, which had to be removed on a number of occasions with a lot of cable that was fished in there to get from consoles and mic receptacles and amplifier rooms through there. And there's also a raceway up at the top of that, which is not ours. That's the video people. All these video cables in that raceway up there at the 9th floor. And so this is a lot of the stuff that had to be installed when the studio became a television studio. There wasn't anything like that. You saw the pictures.
Now, the clearing of the studio is because the news department has dibs on the studio.
They had dibs for a number of years that ran out in the middle 80s. They were no longer allowed to do that. As a matter of fact, election night comes from Rockefeller Plaza. Democracy Now. Democracy, what a name. Democracy Plaza, it's called. And they put lights on the buildings and projections, and it comes from outdoors, and it's a big freaking deal. It's controlled from 8H, but it's done from outdoors. They make a great use of the space. It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. A lot of lights. This shows the relationship between where the audience, which you'll see in a moment, on the deck, and the actors on the stages. They play to each other, but there's scenery all over the place. This is where the on-deck audience sits, thanks to our beloved shipbuilding set designer, Eugene Lee, from Rhode Island, where he builds all the scenery that he wants to build for other shows, a big Broadway designer. The audience can sit in these swivel chairs. They're from yachts. You sit there and you fish. So you fish for laughs. What can I tell you? You see, bada bing, getting those laughs. Dave Wilson would always ask us, "You getting those laughs?" The director. There's the 2 booms, hard to see, sorry. A big camera crane, which goes way up. There wasn't going to be booms. There wasn't going to be a camera crane. There wasn't going to be wired cameras. That never happened. The reality of putting the show on from season 1, that's how that. And this is, thank you, Josiah. This is pictures of the rigging.
Where you're looking, the corner you're looking at now is if you were watching the show, this is the far left corner of the studio. And we used to sometimes set up sketches back here. This whole space here, and this is video wall equipment now, is usually taken over by acts with playback rigs or their own monitor consoles. Sometimes people...
We had a picture of that one time. They photographed that for one act. We saw that. At the end of the camera came around and we saw all of
that. I think so.
Yeah, that was last season, I think. So all of this, these are now stage weights, counterweight pipes, which support 600 lights. And I think that's still the right figure. And pieces of scenery that come in, drops that come in at an angle to things. And
there's also this way in the studio, there's a large rolled up green screen. So it's sort of always ready to
use. Yeah. We started out, we had very simple green screens, then we had 2 green screens, then we had 3 with Kunz's the cat.
Yeah.
The cat that could drive a car. And you had to have, we had finally 4, I think, was last year or the year before. They had all these different angles, and all the cameras except one were shooting inside this car. And then one car pulls up to another car, and they have a big argument, and someone gets shot. And then at the very end, the crane camera pulls back and shows you all these greens.
Yeah.
And all the pictures are in sync with each other. This is now, we'll move along. Where are I? A little more time. This is the Neve console that was made for NBC in 1975. This console now had 36 full-featured channels with EQ and dynamics, 8 submasters, stereo master, mono master. The plant router at that point could accommodate stereo, but we didn't do anything except for one show. And later on, we did something for the Philharmonic with this console. But we did 3 shows for the Philharmonic. They were all simulcast on the radio. console is gone.
We used to have
over
in the
here.
music room. We had some of these compressor limiters.
Yeah.
And they sort of, unfortunately, where are they? We don't know.
They
Yeah,
walked.
they walked.
When the word came out after 5 years or so that this console was going to be taken out, we put these in all the studios, and then they were replaced by SSL, and then they were replaced by Cal-Rex and Labo. So, but this was gold. We'll see a close-up of them in a minute.
The red phone.
The red phone is the SOS phone, which survives from the earliest days of television. If you have an emergency, a technical emergency, you pick up the phone and you announce in 4 words the name of the studio and what the problem is. It comes out over speakers in the maintenance department and a master control. And people who, if they weren't there, and usually there are people there now, they respond because maybe the problem is not in your room. Maybe it is. They know the show. We have some brilliant engineers. I say we after all these years. Brilliant engineers who can address the situation very quickly. So I'll skip that. So you have on this side you have the Neve patching, and we went from double plug patch cords
Say what?
No. Yeah. We went from double plug patch cords in radio and early TV, double Western Electric cords. You got 12 circuits in a 19-inch rack, 12 in a row. And you had to exercise them every time you put it in. This one does, this has it. To make sure you plugged in the correct polarity on both ends of the cord, you have ridges over here. So you plug in this way. We went then to single plug cords, 24 in a row. And these you would exercise and you would twist every time.
A little burnishing.
Burnishing of the contacts, 24 across. Now comes the Neve. I don't have it here. Now comes the Neve with Bantam patch cord.
Little TT.
48 across. TT, tiny telephone. Ooh, it's an Apple phone.
That's to give the dog its medication.
And I'm not sure, but I think these are 1081s.
They probably are. Yeah, Neve 1081. Very nice preamps.
And a different sort of format. There.
Yeah, they look a lot different now.
Yeah.
There are some direct inputs here, utility inputs, all kinds of controls. We won't go into all this stuff. But it's a 16-channel mixed down to stereo and mono. And this is our monitor. We have 3 speakers, you'll see in a minute. This is the other side. This is a later picture.
There's those compressors that we wish you still had.
That we don't have. This is the repurposed, redesigned 6-camera effects filter system. This was done only for when we did stereo. This was done for Bob's season at Bob Lifton's innovation. All the faders were replaced by VCAs, which came to these VCA panels. So we had audio groups, 8 audio groups, and then we had our VCAs. Also, we had, and here's our stereo metering from B&B with the phase scope. And our other innovation was to bring in, a couple years before this, Dolby Cat 43 one-way noise reduction. Before Cedar, before Isotope, this was single-ended, and you had, you can't see it in the picture, sorry, but you had four bands to choose from for expansion, dynamic expansion. It took the quiet stuff and made it quieter. And one of the things we used it for was to take out spotlight fan noise. We're going to take out some of that noise.
From the
Just make it go away.
And these over here.
These are broadcast cart machines, NAB cartridge machines. The audio tape, those are ITCs. Those are stereos. It's a newer installation. And we had, to the left of all this is the operating position for the record man, who was now a tape person who could play back mono tapes and had 2 EMT stunning turntables. With the money, we didn't ask for it. EMT turntables, which were wired were mono, but they were stereo turntables. We played 12-inch discs on there. And Larry Glacy and then Ed Voss and then Walter Ryan operated that equipment.
And my first 2 years, I took over for Walter.
Took over for Walter. And bumpers, background music, music selected by a number of people until we got to Hal Wilner. And Hal Wilner, I'll say very briefly, was another asset, great asset to us along the lines of Bob Lifton. Multidisciplinary, a musician, a record producer, a nut for movie music, and discovered the NBC background music, NBC record library, and that the record library was going to be destroyed, and had hundreds of 16-inch transcriptions of organ. And he got a car and a van and somebody, and they saved those records because they would throw them out. The rest of the record library was library music from Chappell and companies like that, British for the most part, bumpers, DeWolf, and phonograph records. NBC bought all these phonograph records, and that was his source for a long time. The other prominent feature here is this matrix. It's 20 inputs and 20 outputs, and it is to create feeds, mix minus feeds and minus feeds of selected elements to go to speakers in the studio, speakers off stage, headsets that people are listening to, maybe some tape recording. That feature has been replaced in the newer consoles by rather extensive routing, which the guys will talk about.
We forgot one important feature, which is the cup holder here.
Well,
this
the
is a
cup holder.
major.
This is a result of accidents that happened in radio and television.
Right. Many a console
and
exploded.
Terrible things happened where Coca-Cola was spilled in an SSL console. The first a vacation relief engineer, very young, spilled Coca-Cola in the on-the-air radio news studio console. One of these handmade RCA special consoles designed by Steve Pageant in 1963 with faders and all kinds of stuff, controls for 3 studios, and buttons and switches at the bottom, and 2 24-position switches. You can imagine the wiring. Bang goes the Coca-Cola. They get the kid out of there. They get the maintenance guy who comes down and says, I don't want to know who did this. You got to use another studio all day because I'll get it all clean, then it's got to dry. And it's Coca-Cola, it's all sugar.
I was told when I first started at Right Track, summer of 1980, if someone pours water in the console, kill the power. Just turn it off.
Power.
If someone pours Coke in the console, kill the power.
And the person.
Kill the power, and then flush the Coke out with water immediately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So,
okay.
The same thing happened to the same kid 2 weeks later. He's telling the story. Somebody knocks Coke in there, and they fire him on the spot. He was a VR. He could be fired for cause. And they didn't tell Vic Tackett. They got another person to come in and fix it because he would have been exploded.
Because it was the second time.
It's the second time, and this is the on-the-air studio. It's a real pain in the neck.
So in here we have Ludwig van Beethoven.
Ludwig van Beethoven watching us. This is from season 1.
And over here we have
Joel Spector.
Joel Spector.
Oh,
You'll see in other pictures. Beard, my friend.
And this is
This
Scott.
is the legendary
Scott
Scott Schachter, who had mixed the Steve Allen show on the Christmas tree console that you saw earlier for 10 years. The Sunday night Steve Allen variety show and the Tonight Show before it, with a 34-piece orchestra, booms, comedy, sketches, audience, all this stuff from the Hudson Theater and then the Colonial Theater on that console. One person the whole show. This is the same thing now. Music, comedy, commercials, audience reaction, one person. 10 years. And that's how he earned his money and earned his retirement. Over his other shoulder is Jack Keegan, one of the legendary, I hate to call him an A2, he was more than an A2. He was someone who was a lot of electronics experience. He built things for us and solved a lot of technical problems. I was in the control room after the first couple of shows. I was on the floor working with these amazing audio assistants. How to mark cables, how to lay the cables out, how to create a test station behind the set to make sure we could check things before it got to the control room.
Up here.
These are from Hollywood Sound Systems, which was brought into to check out the studio for PA and fallback and microphone supplies. Those are boxes with 8 2x1 relay switches, Soundcraft switches, all XLR. It's all portable equipment. The PA console, excuse me. The PA console had one of those also. There's too many inputs and too many destinations, and we needed switching capability for that.
Cool. That was how we got when the Harrison melted down.
Oh, well, I'll tell them about that in a minute.
Okay.
This is God's gift to audio.
Yeah.
And much. Two Brooklyn boys here that don't take no crap from nobody. Tough guys. You can see that Lifton is he's ready to work. He's active, right? This is to show you, which you'll see in a minute, part of the reverb system. And I'll get to that later, but there's subsidiary patching back here. So a lot of trunks from this patch panel to that panel, to transmission on the 5th floor, to 8 position panels around the control room, and out to the studio. 100 microceptacles, plus 20 for the applause.
Couple of Shure
Well, that depends.
Mixers.
On a show-by-show basis, things
and
that
the 910.
That's a 910.
Yeah.
And we would have an AMS, whatever it was, to do the delay. I had a cue on the show with Huey Lewis, where there was echo in the voice. Turn it on and off. That was cues we had to do. This is showing you the subsidiary patching. It's all this tip sleeve, 1/4-inch patching. The full text on here were to help us with this. These, which we'll have close-ups in later, these are Schober electronic organ reverb systems. And they were the pre-delay for the echo system, which you'll see shortly. The Pultecs were used to equalize what was coming out of those tapes before it went into the reverb, because there was hiss and bumps where the splice was on the tape loops. This is to show you that there are 3 JBL 4315 4-way non-time-aligned monitors for us, powered by various 50-watt amplifiers or more over the years. The crown amps that were put in before we ever went on the air were stolen that week, and so they put in RCA BA48s, solid state. No one's going to steal those, and they lasted a long time. These speakers are in this particular array because they are very shallow, and behind those speakers is 2-foot-high steel beam. It's the wrong word, but yes, to support part of the 9th floor balcony. Same thing on the other side of the room. This space was never designed to be a technical space. It is the found recovered space from the chorus dressing rooms. So the overhead, this wasn't even the real overhead in those days. This is the speaker system.
Yeah.
You have 3 of them. Pretty decent sound.
Yeah.
Scotty would listen to the center speaker only, because he was doing mono. And the 2 side speakers were for pre-hear. It didn't have solo in this console. NBC Engineering didn't want to have solo. They didn't believe in it. And they didn't want to have phantom power. They didn't believe in it. So you had pre-hear on any channel. You hit pre-hear, now you had sound on non-subtractive sound. Pardon me, on the side.
So before you switch slides and while you clear your throat, we can talk for a minute about monitoring in general. Through the years, I imagine that you started on an Oratone in mono when the show was in mono, or something like along those lines. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Never
And then
small speaker,
No.
never.
Never for us.
always
Never in the
large.
production room.
No.
Always the big speakers.
Yeah.
And a modest level. These did very well. They sounded better elsewhere. Scotty said to me, go listen elsewhere. But he knew what the show was going to sound like.
And
Thank you.
then currently, some of the choices for monitors, we can start with Josiah. Bob, you can tell us about yours too. But Josiah for a long time had M&Ks.
Before that, we had Myers HD1s, and then we had Genelex for a moment. Yeah. And then once we went 5.1, we used M&Ks. And now we have PMCs. And that's been a big change because the M&Ks basically
tight boxes that are bass managed, and we had a subwoofer, LFE channel. Now we have full range boxes, and we have 4 Atmos speakers on the ceiling. And there's bass extenders, and there's also an LFE. It took a little bit of like, oh, okay, to figure out what we were listening to. And there was a lot of stuff tightened up. In the room, you'll see the thing from Christos, more bass traps put in. So the room sounds fantastic. It's a little difficult to try to figure out what you're doing on the bottom end with a kick drum, let's say, or bass, when the Kelly Clarkson show is up and running and you can feel their band.
The studio's directly underneath his control room.
That is their ceiling, 6A, which is a 2-story studio, slants up to. So, and they had subs apparently for a while in the ceiling. So I'd be mixing, and there would be a panel behind me. There'd be a rack, and there'd be a panel blank in there. Yeah.
The building was never designed for
Right.
these kind of sound levels because aside from Toscanini's orchestra, which was in the studio at the end of a hall, not on top of anybody, you didn't have to manage that kind of sound. And the studios were floating, and music wasn't done that way. Now it's very aggressive sound. And the Tonight Show studio was underneath Seth Meyers' studio. Had to pour a new floor for Seth Meyers.
And it didn't really solve the
They
problem.
didn't resolve the problem because the building's shaking at this point.
So in terms of monitors, Bob, what do you use when you're working on the show?
Neumann's, just standard plain vanilla right off the rack. They sound great. We started with the Uri timer lines when this room was rebuilt. They replaced the JBLs. And then we went to Meyer HD1s, and then to the M&Ks like the music room had. And we used those for the longest time. I forget what was in between the Meyers, the M&Ks and the Neumanns. There was something in between them.
Oh, yeah, I forgot what that was.
Yeah.
It'll come in all the studios.
Yes,
And there
but we're
were
using Neumanns
also-
now.
The music room used this other pair of speakers, and I know John Alberts made them they were, I can't remember the name of them, but they were these, I used to call them Academy roll-off in a box, because they always sounded really dull. I mean, like, it just felt like the curve, like this. But it helps for radio. I mean, for TV stuff.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I did a sitcom in 8H. I did one episode of this Love Sydney, Tony Randall sitcom.
I worked on the theme song for that Secret Sound. Go figure.
I figured that out. And
Billy
I
Goldenberg.
loved the way it sounded. And it was touching and funny and humorous. We had 3 booms. Everything went beautifully. We had to walk somebody into different rooms. It was seamless. We had the Dolby to help us, and we had the simple PA at that point. We had 2 A7s, 2 Outback A7s for the audience. And it sounded wonderful. I was very proud of that. So now we're going to watch it on the air, because it went to post in California. It comes on the air, and it sounds like this. And I called up Master Control. There's something wrong with the VTR. No, that's what's on it. We heard it this afternoon in rehearsal. That's what they delivered. I called the associate producer, Terry Guarneri. I said, what's the story? And then I called Ed Moskowitz in Hollywood. He says, Alan Patapoff in Burbank is the engineer with a company, it may have been Complete Post, I'm not sure. All the producers want their shows to sound like that. The music always sounds great, but the dialogue sounded like this. Not even good optical sound. That's what those shows sound like, and they added laughs, and oh God. And she said to me, the producer, it's so important to them. It's pictures edited in New York. I have to buy a seat for these tapes and take them on the plane to Burbank and sit with him while he mixes everything and buy 2 more seats and bring them back to New York because the tapes play back on NBC in New York. And it was heartbreaking. And that was the case for a long time. That's not the case at all. Now the stuff sounds fantastic. All these sitcoms, but wow. Going back to here, because I'm almost done with my stuff. AKG BX20E, this is spring reverb, it's 2-channel.
One was added to each studio, each controller.
We were not the first to get them. as they put in those Fairchild consoles, and then the need, everybody got this because the echo chambers went away. This is the inside. The tube has 2 springs and pickup. And it has a remote control for the decay time. To pre-delay that, we had the Shover that I talked about. The engineering department selected one of those heads in consultation with some people on the show. What was the appropriate amount of pre-delay because it was going to be fixed. Whatever it was, that's what it was. We had that for years.
About 10 milliseconds.
5 to 10, something short. Just the inside of it. The 3 components, boys and girls. It was 1950s technology, probably. They had them around, so they used them. Eventually, this was replaced. I found my notes by something from Altec, digital delay, and then something from another company. And it's all different now.
Not a Cooper Time Cube?
Didn't have it then. Well, again, when we didn't have phantom power built into the Neve console, we brought out our trusty AKG with our adapter patch boards and sent phantom power to the microphones as required.
Don Pardo.
Don Pardo's ultimate announce booth is still there.
Still use it.
Daryl doesn't use that booth. It's comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, he's mostly recorded now.
Yeah.
Now and again, he'll make a live
The cast
appearance.
will come in and do things.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
While you have this picture up,
Yeah.
sometimes on sketches, if we have the cast singing, we'll get other vocalists in this booth to sort of beef up a thing. You'll get these ringers, 5 or 6 pros. And I now use an an Audio-Technica 4050 ST, which is a stereo mic. It doesn't have rotating capsules. It's not a C24. Let's not lose ourselves. But it plays games with phase, and you can do like a 90 or a 120 or
really
something.
expand the sound.
So, and it just faces the where the logo is and so forth. So I will put it on a straight stand because I don't want to take up too much floor space. Straight stand, and I have X's and tape marked on the floor, and people stand around that mic. What there also is now is a little spy cam back here.
Okay.
So I can see it when one of these background vocalists is getting bored and is leaning on this thing with the music singing their part, but the mic is here.
Right.
And it's like, let's move on, mic. But it works really well because you get these background vocalists and everything's open, and otherwise you have just this, used to be just this single mono source, which never sounded right to me. I always call those things starfish mixes, where it's like you just have one thing on your face.
Well, in the 50s,
It's a starfish mix.
in the 50s, the Red Skelton show in California, David Rhodes, music director, all those pre-records were like this. And so everybody's on a boom singing chorus numbers, and now comes some pre-record, and it's no presence, it's all here. There's no ambience at all. This was the vogue at that point. It went away eventually, but you know. This is thank God. He was in a hallway in the first season.
Add something?
To this? No, I think it's been said.
The dog was in a hallway.
Is that a mezuzah on the wall?
No,
No, so it looks like a remote
the
control.
remote control for the.
It's a remote control mezuzah.
I knew you would appreciate
I
it.
don't think Don would have that, you know. Just to finish up on this.
Yes,
and then
actually,
we're
David
just about
Sarnoff
done.
nailed that up there.
Wasn't
it's
around.
around.
Wasn't around.
No,
and
I
that's
see that it's
right,
around,
yes. To finish up this part, and then I'm done. There was a 24x3 splitting system from Hollywood Sound. The fallback was a PM1016 with not too many outputs. So Lifton would negotiate with the bands what they weren't going to get because they weren't going to get it. It's television, you know. Well, this is another picture. We'll get to this in a second.
I asked Joel if he still had the shirt because I
I was
wanted
going to say, what year do you think this was?
This is 1975. That's from Club Med. Thank you very much. Martin Heath. This is the legendary. They're all legends. This is the legendary Phil Falcone Sr., who was an engineer with NBC for 49 years. Wow. He was our front of house guy. He was given a Sun Magna 24x8 console because that's what they had in their rental inventory. It was going to be a PM1000. They got this instead, and he made that work. He had all. We're not going into any of the zones and all that, but there was a comedy PA system. with column speakers and small speakers close to the audience. And then there was the big music system, this bi-amplified box. There were going to be two of them originally, and they killed that because there was no room to hang them. And the music system was pretty damn good. It was, and there was narrowband equalization provided for all the sounds.
The last person is Scott.
That's Scott Schachter in color. Now there's 100 microphone receptacles plus 20 for the applause.
Here's a super serious, not ready for primetime
It's
players.
the first cast. You can tell because Chevy's in the picture.
There's a little story we can tell here about the incident with Lorraine when she was taking a nap.
Oh, well, with all this rehearsal and changes, et cetera, you have a production meeting at 10:30 after dress rehearsal. 10:30, right? And we had a scene on one of the stages, a party scene, 10 people in the scene. Lorraine was supposed to make an upstage entrance, and she had lines upstage. Knock on the door, come in, talking, and come downstage. Well, terrible boom shadows because it never got lit properly. We didn't have time for that. Go to the meeting, we're told, don't worry about that scene. Lorraine is not in the scene. We gave her lines to somebody else. There's no upstage entrance. There won't be a boom shadow. We're on the air, in the middle of the scene, knock, knock, knock. What's going on, says the director. The sound effects guy says, it's not me. And the actor who used to have an entrance, used to go up and greet her, figured somebody's back there. He goes up, oh, look, everybody, it's Lorraine. The boom shadows. Lorraine, earlier in the day, uncharacteristically, was trying to take a nap in the dressing room, and the paging speaker was going off, paging this person, paging that person. She ripped it out of the wall. All right? And so, didn't tell anybody. Went about the rehearsal. Didn't go to the meeting because didn't go to the meeting. Goes backstage, says to herself, she told us eventually, I thought it was odd that Joe Dixo, the stage manager, wasn't back there to give me the cue to go on, but I heard my line, so I knocked on the door and I went in. You should have seen their faces, she said. Oh! It was a change that didn't happen. So now everybody had to fill in the dialogue and the booms had to figure out where to be, etc.
One of those rare times there was improv.
Yes. Lauren doesn't like improv.
Well, I always tell people when everyone asks me, oh, so there's improv, and they're like, no. Part of the thing is, you have a line, I have a line, and on my line, there's a lighting change, there's a music cue and whatnot.
There's
And
100
everything
people
is
involved.
interconnected and
That's
dependent
right.
on everything else. I describe improv as you're watching the Tour de France, and some schnook goes down on his bike, and everyone else piles up behind him. That's what happens when you go off script and screw something up.
Oh, boy.
Everything just accordions right into it.
That's right.
But the way it's written and the way it's performed, it would almost seem as though it was improvised. That's one of the beauties of
That's
the
style.
sketch
And I
comedy
think
that
that's why
they do.
people always
really
ask,
is.
so when do you guys tape? It's
Yeah.
not. Sometimes it's just flawless.
There are pieces that are taped. This has become
Right.
more and more, and Ron has been in some of those pieces.
Please don't destroy it.
Yeah.
They're not just the films from those two crazy guys, whoever they are, but whole scenes with a lot of production. And those scenes are very effective because they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they haven't been rewritten while the actors are speaking, and they play very well. There's 45 people in the film unit that make those recorded pieces. We didn't have 45 people to put the show on the air in 1975.
Right.
Shot on Super 16. There are a lot of stories about that stuff. Basically, my slides are finished. Josiah has some other slides about this. This is the beginnings of RF in the studio. There was originally no RF in the studio, no wireless mics. It was a big specialty. You needed to have this person or that person. They knew how to put up the antennas. Now everything is installed permanently. You'll see some more work. It's all done by someone who's not there anymore, but it's done with military precision. And there's no interference. And no interference from the outside or the other studios. Every studio has 4 or 6 microphones minimum, and the larger studios have, we were talking before, 40, 50, 60 channels of microphones and headset communication, because all the communication is wireless.
And we'll get guest bands in
With
who
wireless
have
equipment.
stereo in-ear mixes and wireless guitar and this and that. And
A lot of RF.
Speaking of
so much
wireless,
RF.
back in the day, before wireless was a thing, Joel decided, hey, let's experiment and have booms, wireless booms. Why don't you tell us about that?
All right. You saw the size of those booms, that they're large platforms, and you have to move them from one side of the studio to the other according to the plan, and the plan can get pretty convoluted when the running order changes. And so we thought, suppose we could make this wireless. What will we need? Well, we want to have a storage battery, car battery, or marine battery on the platform to provide power for the monitor that the video engineer has, and the speaker that we have is a Q speaker for the actors. And let's try this out. So now
Because there's a huge snake that comes
well,
along
there's no
with it
snake.
normally.
It's power, audio, video, and it's a lot of stuff. And then you need a person
comms.
to manage all that. And the moves are very fast sometimes, and if they're not the way we really planned it, it can be tough, you know. So we tried that for one season, for part of one season, but we stopped doing it because the only equipment we had available were Vega wireless body pack, VHF. No dynamic range, really. And when you have somebody like, you're feeding a boom mic into this, was never designed for that. Put out a lot of level. You couldn't set the gain properly because, on the transmitter, because there was a range of people speaking. And when you get Dan Aykroyd with this big chest voice, not even Belushi, but Aykroyd, bellowing some of those lines, normally it's not a problem at all. It works very well. The Vega would fold. And so we got distortion, and we said, well, we're not doing this anymore. That was the end of that. But it was quite an experiment to try. Now you have people who know what they're doing. The maintenance people know how to do it. The operating people know how to do it, how to use it. It's not a problem. This is the music room, the temporary music room, which was built in a corner under the bleachers, in a room that was originally a sound effects room. And this is the first iteration of a music room. This is the Harrison console. Bobby can talk about this.
Well, it's 40 mono, 4 stereo in. Those are the Uris that came with me when we crossed the hall. I'm sorry. Did I lose my microphone?
No. You're just going to turn you up.
Oh.
No. Turn him up. He's a quiet speaker.
I was looking away. I'm sorry. I was looking at the picture. Okay. We also had some outboard. We had some Yamaha 406s that you could see. Oh, thank you, Joel. And
Yamaha consoles.
yes.
Yamaha 406s
And a Game Brain rack up top. Those Game Brain,
down below they are. Yeah.
Those Game Brains
Yes.
up there on the top.
No, that was.
Are they Keypexes?
They look like keypads.
I think those were Keypexes. Yes.
So gates.
Okay.
Gates, yeah.
Yes.
The secret to all that stuff is gates. This is unfinished. Yeah. This was done in 2.5 weeks.
And where that chair is where the multi-track machine ended up. And not much more I can say about it, really.
The 224X.
Yeah. Yeah. There was some other outboard gear that went in there. We eventually got some AMS equipment and stuff.
Over the seasons.
About the Harrison, why don't you tell us how that got installed?
Well,
that came down to 6th Avenue from the AES show at the Wall of Astoria.
Yeah, stock just.
At the Hilton, I'm sorry. At the Hilton.
They wheeled it in.
They wheeled it in. It was on display, and they got it down there. I don't know if they wheeled it on 6th Avenue, but it's a good story that they brought it directly from the AES show, which was early in September. And there was no time to do this, but it got done. And it was there for a season, and that necessitated us to put that VCA package I talked about earlier on the Neve console, so that we could manage our production sound and integrate the sound from them in that fashion. This is the latest version of the sound effects room, which was staffed by the great Bill Taylor, who just passed away last year, who did the show for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Bill was a guy who could invent things. He had samplers in here. He had every sound effects library there was on servers. He had samplers. He did live sound effects, recorded sound effects, whatever it was. He never said that's not going to be a problem. He just did it.
Yeah.
But he let us know it was a problem.
Yeah.
But he was a real character, but he was a genius at what he did. Just wonderful. It was took a long time to train the people to replace him. and the timing was.
There's a master of ceremonies.
This is the next console that was an 8H control, and Bob used this console, really. I'm sitting in this chair working with him on the 15th anniversary show. It's an SSL 6048 with 32 monos and 16 stereos, wraparound console with some direct inputs, 32 mixing buses, very hot rodded for us for this studio. We didn't really use the automation was the set it.
Wasn't really even automation.
They
It was
called
like,
it real time, but it wasn't
Yeah.
real time. It was postcards. You took pictures of snapshots.
Right. And then you had to
turn
line it
all the
up
knobs
until
and
it.
match the picture of it, right?
The old Total Recall. Yeah.
Total Recall, that's what it was,
But,
yes.
but it was a step up. You see behind there the audio tape area, which has now been changed. The rack-mounted tape, RT21 tape recorders are gone. They're now MCIs. There's they're now Otaris at this point.
MTR.
And there was a Pacific Recorders radio broadcast console with remote controls for that operation.
And when I started on Thursdays, I sat there
Right.
in that
In the
spot.
back, yeah.
And then on Fridays, I would move
Those
down.
are the covers for the turntables.
Yep.
Right. And we got a lot of good use out of this thing. We can make a lot of feeds. You need a lot of auxiliary feeds and help out prepackaged stuff for PA and
Pretty
fullback.
narrow, tight space.
Well, yeah, because you have to have this patching here.
And it was also unique to the building in that it had the wing on the side.
Yeah.
All the other consoles were.
I'd seen that in Burbank. They got it from the Tonight Show, and they didn't have a lot of space, so they had an angled console. And it worked very well for us for a
Yeah.
long time. Now this is
It's my beloved T-Series. This was the first CalRec that went into NBC, and it was the first digitally controlled analog desk. And it was a real step up, in my opinion, after the SSL because it did so much more. And a lot of it was stock. We had almost no modifications that were necessary to make it work. And again, the way it was built custom with the wings on the side, that was also unique to the building. And every other CalRec that went in, by then they had graduated to the Alphas. And those were all in a line. There were no wings on those. Straight line.
There's the computer.
Yeah.
You know, for making scenes. And the difference between this and before and after, if I'm correct now, you had one equalizer module that you assigned to a particular input.
Well, the whole desk was like that. Whatever you called
One equalizer,
to
one
it.
dynamics, etc.
Right.
Instead of having it stripped with 100 controls on it for every input. It's
Yes.
centralized. How did
Yes.
that work out for you? Did you like that?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great.
Okay, now we have Bob works on the, this is the Alpha, right?
That's the Alpha,
The
yes.
next console, you see that the rack is much smaller. This is not the same room.
No, this is when we moved across the hall and the show started doing high def. And this was the first.
And this is the same location.
Same location as
today.
as today, yes.
Yeah. The entire control room was moved out into the hallway where all those demolished radio studios used to be. It's a work of art. Production control room has got a wall of digital monitors. You can put one image on all those monitors.
Yes, you can.
or whatever you want. Big monitor, small monitor, clock, tallies, anything you need is all in there. And you have a lot of assignable monitors too.
Well, I have one assignable monitor that I use mainly to show the booms when there's danger of them being in a shot, or to show them what's coming up. So it's like a little
That was the rationale.
preview.
In the Christmas tree console with the reflective monitors, that was the rationale for having all those camera monitors. The engineer could warn the operators that they were getting into the shot. Although our first two operators, John and John, they did the soap operas. It was a point of pride that they would never get it.
Yeah,
But every once in a while you'd hear from the director, boom, boom, boom.
yeah. I've heard that before.
Yeah. Here's the next console.
Okay, this is the Artemis. This is what's currently in the 8H audio room. It's replaced the Alpha in the same location. And the routing is completely different. We have these routers now. If you could see this wall over here, they would notice there'd be no more patches.
I took a shot where you see that wall. It used to be just wall-to-wall patch bays, and now
Now they're all
Nothing.
gone for inputs and outputs. We also use a Lavo router, which is common to the music room and some other destinations for, well, I get it for the audience mics, and then the RF mics go through there as well. What else? Occasionally a hard line will go through there, and we could also route outputs to it from my desk.
Another view of
It's another view of the
Very pretty.
Alpha.
But it's telling you exactly what's going on. You know where to look, it tells you exactly what's going on. Another view. Yeah. Okay.
Now we're in the music room.
There's the music
This is
room.
now the music room, which is at the far end of the 8th floor, opposite us.
And this Lavo is, we have 48 faders, 6 banks, or 6 layers. So, you know, it's much bigger than it looks in a way.
Yeah.
Back in the day when we had the SSL 4000, it went from that wall, which sort of looks at a bit of an angle, but it went into there to about here. Then we had an SSL 9000, two-sided. One side was guest band, the other side was house band. And then we had the Lavo 66, and now we have the Lavo 56. And this is with the PMC speakers. You can see some of the Atmos goodies up there. This is my super rack, the Waves grid for outboard gear. There's some other outboard gear over here. A few older toys, 2 33609s, which I love, and Pro Tools. And then I think there's another shot, Rowie, if we can maybe see something else. No, I thought there was another one maybe further. Let's see if there's anything. No. Okay, well, we can go back just quickly to that. All right, this, first of all, is the room across the hall from me, also with the Lavo 56, and they're the ones who do the all the audio tape playback and everything like that, with samplers, and they're using Ableton, they're using Akai samplers, they're using Pro Tools and whatnot. When I did this, I had this rickety rack of 18 cart decks, playback only, and you would push things. And George Corrado, this other fellow who worked in another room, if I had a sketch with 32 cues in it, he would watch me, and as I pulled down Q1, he would just take things out and put the next one in. You just pack it back, so when I got down to here, I was ready to go with the next cue, and Hal Wilner was calling out and do this, and calling out the numbers and whatnot. And then what I would do between dress and air is I would take each cart and load it up and push play and make sure they all cycled back to the beginning. Because George would have pulled them out at whatever time. I mean, that was stressful, yes. This is just more shots of the A2 area with wireless mics and wireless comms.
Yeah, it's the current.
This is the current installation. And the A2 area, commonly called Butch, because it's a butcher block surface.
This is underneath the bleachers.
Underneath the bleachers, yeah.
That's where the audience sits up.
Didn't Fallback used to be there in the early days?
Used to be in that spot.
Yeah, I thought so. When I started mixing the show, we had 3 big channels of RF, remember?
Yeah.
And we had to share them with the music room.
That's right.
So from then till now, it's exploded because I have 32 channels of my own. Josiah's got, at least a dozen RF channels at your disposal?
Yes, I mean, there's music room RFs.
And plus all the comms, all the communications. I mean, there's a lot of RF in that one studio alone.
Sometimes we'll have like a practical acoustic guitar or something in a sketch. So
this is a short bit made by the designer who did the renovation of the music room.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christos Santillis. I'm the designer for the NBC SNL Music Mix Room that we were able to update and turn into an Atmos room. And let's go with the slideshow. Here, you'll see the before pic and the room prior to any acoustic treatments being installed. This is the back wall and the side wall of the room as well. Here you'll see the before acoustic analysis and the after acoustic analysis. If we look at the before on the left-hand side, you'll notice a few areas that are circled, some dips, some peaks in the frequencies, and our goal was to try to get it a little bit tighter and a little bit flatter. Once we were able to, once I designed and had the plan in place, I was able to send that to my render team. And from there, they were able to create this render of the back wall. Here's another picture of the back wall render. Now, from this point on, we ended up giving the production build to our production build team, which is Ken Captain at Solar 2. He took my plans and built out the acoustics for the room. This is the front room with installation complete, including bass trapping and diffusion. This is the back room with the bass trapping and diffusion completed. And as you can see, when we go back to the render, that it looks very similar. Once again, we'll show the RTA, the before on the left-hand side, and the areas that are circled versus the completed tuned room, which is definitely a bit flatter. Here, you'll see the reverb time in seconds. Notice how much of a difference we were able to eliminate rings in the room in the 50, 60, and 80 hertz range, which is pretty amazing. And our last check was our clarity check. And you can see on the left-hand side, we had not as much clarity as we would like from 80 hertz down, basically. And all the treatments were able to basically fix that issue.
Cool.
And that's that.
Song I'll play. This one I'll play a little longer. The reason I say 45 seconds is we'll get muted on Facebook because of copyright issues. But what's interesting about this clip is it shows you the studio throughout the performance. So we'll probably watch this whole
thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Coldplay.
Check out the dynamic range here.
With my friend.
Other than I had no idea that was going to happen. Oh. And watch this guy.
Sorry.
Had it upside down. But this is all one shot from when we start. These guys are wireless. And no one's lip syncing here. Their guy Rick Simpson brings his own UAD rack of reverb, and so that I'm using his reverb
vocal, his preferred setting.
Yep. And you'll hear mic goes off a little bit. And this is what people, there's all sorts of video stuff brought in. There's a little bit of effects playing with them, little percussive things, and it's all time code driven for the video wall. And one of the new reissued Neumann U67s as an overhead, and they just left it there after Thursday until Saturday. I'm like, Rick, you want? Nah, it's fine. I mean, you go look in my house if you find it's missing.
All live.
Okay. Is there any other mic thing?
Well, the other thing that I wanted to mention was that when we first started planning this out, he wanted to walk across the studio and have a boom follow him. And we were all like, this ain't gonna work. So it kind of, we let it fail. And then I had to speak with him, and I thought, all these people around, everyone's there, and I'm like, look, and I'm talking to him. He's a little bit taller than me, blue eyes like your shirt, and the plumbing accent. I just wanted to be like, girls, I get it. Anyway, we just chatted for a bit, and I said, we're going to have to do the thing. So he was perfectly fine to have someone, they taped the mic to him, and I just did the change. That guy handed the mic off, and it worked really well. Cool. I don't know if we have any other things. We can. This is quick. We can take a quick look at the smiley thing.
40, until it gets muted. We don't know how long, but. Okay.
I don't know how good this is. Is this from the thing that I sent you? Then it might not sound right because it was a weird fold down.
Ready.
Everybody here is on wireless. There's a ATM 35 on him, and these two guitars.
I have a 35, but it's not.
Yeah, we're not getting the vocal. Something happened with the fold down.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, this is, but trust me.
Well, I remember the show. It sounded great on it.
Yeah.
So we can just, and the only other thing was that Fred Armisen was up there playing tambourine, and that was like a last minute addition. Like,
Right.
we're gonna,
He was in
Yeah.
wait mode for a while before his
yeah,
part.
and are we gonna put a mic on him? And I was just, we'll just get what we get from leakage, and it turned out fine.
You mentioned following him around with a boom.
Yeah.
We did a boom one time and had Kate Bush to sing Man with a Child in His Arms. This very mellow ballad. She has a small voice, a good voice, a small voice. And she was to be in a mermaid costume with mesh, 3 layers of mesh, because, okay, 3 layers of mesh, nowhere to put a microphone, not going to hold a microphone, on top of the piano, surrounded by Howard Shore and 4 musicians, tuba and trumpet and a couple of other things. What are we going to do? We don't want to see anything. We want to see anything. Fine, be on the boom.
Alan Rubin,
Of course.
with her dressed like a mermaid.
Of course.
Aye.
And
Anyway.
Alan Rubin wanted to know how much money. And so, I didn't say that. So, it was decided, we have deal 42 on the boom, we're going to find a spot, we're going to do the whole thing on the boom, but they want the camera to go all around. Well, the boom was over here, and it sounded great. It was, they kept telling it, the musicians, saying, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And Scotty looked at him and said, that's what we're doing. And Lifton came out and said, that's what we're doing. Balance it.
Mm-hmm.
Looked at Howard, balance it on the stage. Perfection. You know, sometimes you have to use the boom. You had this Miles Davis during that time period where he would wander around. So he had 4 cameras at each corner of the stage, and he had a wireless on his trumpet. He played about 5 notes, and that was great. Yeah, we got it. That's how he was on a Dick Cavett show 2 weeks later with no band, and he played 20 minutes of music.
So in a moment, we can open it up to any questions the audience might have. I think if I could just remind Josiah to tell us a little bit about his use of JamSync and an incident that happened because of UTC and time zones and.
Oh yeah, this is specifically goofy to us. The show, of course, goes on the air as far as SMPTE is concerned at 23:30, but time code, there's a second generator in the building, TC2, and we all sync to that. And someone once asked me, you set it 12 hours ahead? I know, 12 hours back. And you just watch them ruminate on that for a while. Anyway, we start at 11:29:30, but who's counting?
Right.
11:29:36, I guess, is when we actually hit the air after the little NBC Presents thing happens. And so I have everything synced up, my Fairlight recorder and my Pro Tools and everything. And it all works fine during the season. But now, at 8 o'clock, my Fairlight jumps out of record. It hiccups. It gets a hit with time code. Pro Tools is fine, but the Fairlight jumps out because we're now in daylight savings time. And everything is locked to universal time constant. And that crosses the Rubicon at 0 hours. And somehow there's a hiccup that's introduced into the time code everywhere, and the Fairlight reacts to it. Before we adjusted the clocks, it was at 7 p.m.
Right.
And we're not in record at 7. So I never knew there was an issue. It took us a while to figure it out, because there would be times I'd be doing something and I'd look, I was in record, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And then finally realized it was kicking out at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Just because there's not enough
Stuff that
goofiness
happens.
going on. Yeah.
Enough things to worry about. Yeah.
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 We had our Pro Tools go out and record at 8 o'clock many times.
Because of that.
Yeah, until it was.
Then one day somebody, as Josiah said, smacked their head.
Yeah, I don't know how we all came up with it. It's like, wait a second. And it was, I think it might have been Glenn who said, well, how time code is actually synced up in the studio or in the building, and it's getting it somehow. And I don't know whether or not, someone was flicking a switch, in Dry Creek, Colorado or something, which is where Comcast, all blessings flow now. We send our signal, I guess it's fiber, right to Dry Creek, Colorado, which is Comcast. But then it comes back to broadcast and it gets released to the network still from New York.
Pretty sure, yeah.
So
Comcast bought the company, and they have an enormous existing plant in Dry Creek, Colorado, to distribute everything to all their cable systems, etc. And they said, why do we need all this master control stuff in Radio City when we already have the place out there? So they demolished everything that was in the second floor of NBC, master control, and equipment room, all kinds of things.
Fifth floor transmission went away too.
Transmission, everything, satellites, it's all in Colorado.
And
because it's all IP based now.
Yeah, and I mean, you were saying about copper being in sync. It seems like the only thing, it used to be really, really, really hard to get out of sync in TV. And now it's all you can do is to stay in sync.
That's right. Between the point of origin and the home listener, home viewer, there's too many opportunities for things to get messed up. And it happens a lot. You don't control that, you don't own all of it. And everyone's using digital equipment, and there's time delay, and there's opportunity for channels to get crossed or get out of sync. When you listen to the beep on the radio, you look at your phone, the beep is not right.
Yeah.
The time hack on the radio used to be Western Union. It was like, this is it. We run the railroads on that. And broadcasters.
Which is why we also have time zones because of the railroads.
Because of the railroads. And so.
Keep trains from going boom.
Yeah, it's if you're listening to a radio and someone's listening to something on their phone, everyone's processing time is different. So
The other thing I'd like to just, because everything's an analogy with me, if anyone here has had any experience mixing a record and then going into mastering and having it cut into a lacquer, and then that is electroplated a number of times, and then it's squeezed onto a little vinyl turd, and it comes out, and you put your needle on it, and it actually kind of sounds like what you did.
Yeah.
That just shouldn't work.
Right.
I'm amazed that it happens. And sometimes with us getting stuff up on the air, it's like, it's just amazing that it actually.
It is rocket science.
Yeah.
It's
well, the show is unique. There's really no other show like between all of us. We've mixed dozens of different shows, and there's absolutely no show like SNL.
And I feel it's an honor to walk into that building.
I've been doing it since I was a kid. I can't
It's
believe
just
it.
amazing to work there.
You guys acquired a lot of tribal knowledge.
Tribal knowledge, as we call it, yeah. And when they did some renovations in the elevator lobbies and also in Studio 6A when we put the Maya and Marty show in there.
Right.
All of a sudden now are exposed main steel beams
Oh, yeah.
with rivets driven by hand.
Yep.
And we're about 7 or 8 years away. Same thing with Radio City Music Hall and everything.
Yeah.
There, 7, 8 years away
From 100 years.
from this, like that venue being 100 years
It's
old.
92 years old now.
And it's still standing and it's still working. And as like you said earlier, and I tell people this when they look around, I take them on a tour, they're like, it's small. I said, well, it's not as small as you think when you have to run from a sketch from here to here.
Right.
But also, you find me another column-free production space in Midtown Manhattan with a grid and everything.
That's right. You got to go to Yonkers or the Bronx or
you can do
Long
your
Island.
TV, but you can do your TV shows. You can do the Drew Barrymore show or whatnot,
Right.
all the way over in the Arctic blast of CBS broadcast on West 57th Street. And there's all sorts of stuff to not do around there.
Yeah.
But it is such an amazing location to be at Radio City.
And we have the street. We own the street. Today Show does its concerts. Today Show would start doing concerts like all the other shows. Well, you got to negotiate down with the group. They can't have this. They can't have that. Now they get whatever they want.
Yeah, you can't go too loud until like 6:30 because of the hotels.
Yeah, but aside from that, the people in the offices now cheer the music acts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a younger crowd. It used to be, what's all that noise out there?
Yes.
Well, we've taken the record for the longest AES presentation, although it was jam-packed with information. We will be having a raffle shortly for everyone who'd wait around patiently. Any questions from the audience? If so, please come up to that mic next to Rich, our lovely host and sound person, and ask the question. If not, that's okay, but if anyone has any questions, now would be the time. Come on up, don't be shy.
Thank you guys for doing this. I've been lucky enough to go to the shows. This is really cool to see the behind the scenes of.
Which show did you go to see? Do you remember?
I was at the double. Lizzo was the host and musical guest in 2022.
Oh,
I was
okay.
at the dress rehearsal. My dad and I won the email lottery, so we chose that one. But anyways, I know British SNL was just announced.
Yes.
If there's one thing that you guys don't have in New York or that you could bring from New York too, like the England version, what would it be? And are they consulting you guys or anybody else that you've worked with at all on sort of developing that
Not
version?
yet. They should, I think.
Yeah, I think they
Is that
should.
going to be Lauren's show as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know what they're going to do. If they did the Paris, the French version, and I was a consultant, I would be in sackcloth and ashes. But that's... I think they should.
They should, but so far they have not.
No.
Yeah, I don't know how far they are into that.
It's just
either,
recently
but-
announced.
It's just recently announced. And there was, several years ago, there was talk of doing the SNL experience out in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I went to the one here in New York, which was crazy.
But what they were going to do in Vegas was actually recreate the set and have shows and sketches, maybe a pared down version, and have other cast members or former cast members sort of host the evening and so forth. There's this whole thing, and they were going to bring us out. I was talked to about coming out. It never happened. Because talk is exceptionally cheap, and actually implementing
Action
things
is a lot harder.
is brutally expensive.
Fair. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for that
Thank
question.
you.
Anyone else? Jules Holland.
Thank you guys again. My question is, how have you, and as the technology has advanced, how have you historically and now, how do you deal with redundancy? And do you use redundant systems or not really?
It depends on what is being redundant. Like we record, you've got.
Well, I have two
machines.
recorders, but sometimes, like when we had Brandy Carlisle and Elton John on, we almost always have a spare microphone for the artist. And sometimes we will have two identical chains. I'll just have one mic and in this channel, one mic in that channel. What we sometimes get clever with is the Lavo has an A input, which is my channel path, my mic, B, which is when I switch over and listen to Pro Tools, and then there's a third input called C. And what I'll do is I'll take that channel, the spare channel, drop it into there, and then if I were to hit in an emergency, if I had the presence of mind to go, oh my God, go here, I would then duplicate the outboard compressor or any other onboard processing I have in the same channel right there, but I can switch to the spare mic. The other thing that the Lavo will let me do is you can link faders, or you can link input channels and select which items you wish to link. So what I will do is I won't link fader and mutes, but I'll link aux sends, EQ, compressors, and whatnot. So when I'm working, it doesn't link mic pre's, so I always have to double check that. But I can be working on whatever I want to do with the main vocal mic, and the spare mic channel is playing along in the background any changes that I've made. So it follows along.
That's pretty cool. That's
yes, I
that.
wish I could take credit for that hack, but the guy who taught me how to use the Lavo showed me that, and that was one of those. Forget the heart-lung machine. Forget sliced bread. That's the best thing I've ever encountered.
But fundamentally, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But those are the little things that I love about that board and other stuff where it's just figuring out all these little things. That is, I'm always wanting my technology. I don't want the technology to dictate how I have to work. I want the technology to work for me. And because, as I said, art history humanities major, I shouldn't be allowed to look at this stuff, let alone touch it, I feel, But, yeah, redundancy is a huge thing. There's redundant power supplies in the console.
That's what I was going to say, that my console has 2 power supplies. And if one should fail, it automatically knows to go to the other one. So that's an important redundancy right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but also, knock wood. Well, we had a big hassle at the beginning of the season, where the console froze up. There was a bug, and it's a long story. I won't go into too many details, but I basically needed a paperclip to just boink and reset the console. Seriously. And 90 seconds later, it came back. But it was a long lot of nothing on the air until that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about stress before. That was a stressful moment.
That was really a doozer,
I stepped from home and I said, I feel for those guys. Obviously, nothing is working to solve the problem.
And
with all the redundancy that's available, when it stops.
Yeah.
Happened on a Macy's parade on the Capricorn Conference.
I remember that.
And it got hung up, and it turned out it was a graphics module that failed. It's trying to change something in the display, and it took the whole console down.
That's probably what kept Neve out of the building at that point.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
they said,
but it was a long time before they said, when we went on the air with the SSL MT Plus.
That was another one
that was
prone to issues.
Yeah, well, but it worked. Ultimately, it just outlived its lifespan. They didn't sell enough of them to give us enough spare parts to have around. But it was a great sounding board.
Yeah.
And when we got it, I was terrified. And by the time we took it out, I said,
We're comfortable on it, yeah.
I was coiled around it like a lovesick python. Don't take this away from me.
I got to know a version of that at Electric Lady because they put that in the C room.
And Campo had something or other.
So, anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You said that you use Dolby Atmos occasionally, more for putting onto Peacock. Was that correct?
Yes.
You said that you mostly use 7.1.2.
No, our format is 5.1.4.
Okay. I was just curious if you ever use a higher object count for special occasions, or if you mostly just stick to that format.
We'll discuss that offline.
Okay.
I will tell you that when I visited Sony recently, in the QC department,
I used to work for that department.
It's a 514 room.
Yeah.
So I had to listen to my 916 mixes in 514, and boy, was that an educational experience.
Were you with Steven?
Yeah, actually with Dan Tobias, and I believe Steven was the person with
Yeah,
him.
I used to work with them until very recently.
Yeah, so that like was an eye opener for me. Like, I should probably set my room up at 514 because I'm really psyching myself out because the industry's not supporting it at 916.
Yeah.
As much as I love 916, but anyway.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I was just curious.
Anyone else? Richie, I feel like you have a question. No. All right. Question going once, going twice. All right. Well, everybody's here to talk to our panelists, but that was it for the stream. We're going to stop that in a moment. And
Saturday Night Live! I'm back here with Mark Jones.
all right, Lauren, we're giving you back the show now.
Lauren likes to say
We just borrowed it.
Lauren likes to say we don't go on the air because we're ready. We go on the air because it's 11:30. Which the other end of that is if we get cut off at the end, whatever happens, we're going to take the show off the air. So go on because it's 11:30.
Great. Again, thanks so much to VoxPod and to Buttons for hosting us. And thanks to Eventide for providing our raffle. That only people that are here are entitled to be in the raffle. And come see us on the 20th of another great event, network, be with like-minded people, see another great facility, support the AES. Thanks everyone for being here. And we'll see you all around the way sometime soon, Facebook land.